Good morning. Welcome to the first Police and Crime panel of this municipal year. Please note that the proceedings at this meeting are being recorded and streamed live. Before we proceed with the nominations for Chair and Vice Chair, in line with the panel's procedures, I'd like to bring your attention to some housekeeping matters. If you wish to speak during the meeting, I would ask that you raise your hand and wait for the Chair to invite you to speak. In terms of voting, we'll be voting via show of hands today. Any panel member may stand for election as chair, and the candidate receiving the most votes from amongst those present will be elected. If there are 3 or more candidates for the position and none has more than half of the votes, the candidate with the fewest votes will be eliminated and a new vote taken. This will continue until one candidate has more than half the votes. Moving on to item 1, nominations for chair. Can I please seek a nomination for chair, please? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you. I'm substituting for Councillor Nikki Chopak today, who unfortunately is unable to attend this meeting, and I would like to propose her for the position of chair, as I understand that procedurally she can be appointed in her absence. Councillor Chopak is an extremely experienced councillor. She's sat on this panel for a number of years and has acted as vice chair for the last year. I think going forward, the panel is going to need an experienced and, what's the word I'm looking for? Robust, that's the word, thank you. Robust chair, and I think Councillor Chopak would fill that position admirably.
Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Penberthy. Are there any more nominations for chair? No. Can I just get a quick vote then, please, for Councillor Chopak as chair for the municipal year? Thank you. Moving on to item 2, the appointment of the vice chair for the municipal year. Please, can I seek a nomination? Councillor Lodge.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Thomas, please.
Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Lever. And any more nominations, please? No, just a quick vote then, please. Thank you. Moving on to apologies. As the chair and
sorry, I'll let you do the, then I'll move on.
Thank you. As the chair has given apologies, Councillor Thomas, do you want to come up?
Well, thank you very much, members. That was a very quick accession to glory, wasn't it? So there we go. Okay, we will move swiftly on then. Item 3 on this morning's agenda is apologies.
Chair, just
Councillor Penberthy.
just before we move to apologies, since our last meeting, for one of our former members, Councillor Towell, sadly died, but also I'm aware we wouldn't normally do this for a member of the public, but the Right Honourable Anne Widdecombe is a former South West MEP and was a Minister of State for Prisons, and it feels appropriate that we also mark that today. So I wondered whether we might hold a 1-minute silence in memory of them both.
I think that was entirely appropriate. I think we can, those who'd like to, I think we should probably stand and do that. Thank you very much, members. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Member. You're absolutely right to pull me up on that. I mean, and I think we should all be grateful to the Chief Constable for the speed in which he came to speak to chief executives across the local authority areas in the result of Miss Widdicombe's murder, and I'm sure the Commissioner will be talking more about Operation Ford. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's take apologies then, please. Jake?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Ewings, Councillor Loudon, Councillor Tyerman, Councillor Roger, Councillor Shopak and Councillor Burnett is substituted, and Councillor Mitchell is running a little late today.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, moving on then. Item 4, minutes. Members, are you happy with the minutes? Any comments, any observations, any questions from the panel? No? Everyone happy? Okay, in which case I propose the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting held on the 30th of January 2026. Could I have a second, please? Thank you very much. Excellent. All those in favour? That's clearly carried for you, Jake. Okay, thank you very much. Item 5, declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of any item on the agenda in which they may have an interest? No, pretty clear there. Great stuff, thank you very much. Okay, item 6. We've had a public question. The gentleman isn't here to receive a supplementary, but there has been an answer given, so I guess you're going to send that one to him.
Yes.
Okay, unless the panel are wanting to do anything else, we'll move on from that. That's fine. Okay, item 7 is the commission. We don't have points of order from members of the public, I'm afraid. We've had a written question. I believe you submitted a written question, but you received a very detailed answer explaining that your question, sir, was to do with the police, and this panel is specifically constituted to scrutinise the Commissioner. So if your complaint is to do with the police, your next step, I'm guessing, would be the Ombudsman? Yes, I know, I've seen you emailed, yes. So we can't take it at this meeting, I'm afraid, and that was made clear in an email that the panel have been copied into as well. Well, that's by the by. You are not permitted to speak, sir. I'm very sorry, but the Chair's decision on that is very clear, and the policies and the legally constituted position of this committee is that we are here to scrutinise the Commissioner. Well, then you will need to submit a question in good time. Right, so I'm now asked, I'm afraid, that if a member of the public is disrupting the meeting, I may warn you, if you carry on disrupting the meeting, I may have you removed and I may have to halt the meeting until you leave. I understand, and that your disapprobation is noted, and if we can help you in between this meeting and the next one to get an answer to which would give you satisfaction, then we will do that. But we cannot do that, sir, at this meeting. I'm going to move back to item 7. Thank you for your understanding, sir. And as I say, you can contact us on email in between meetings. Commissioner, we're going to move to item 7 now, which is your update report. If I go to you, please, if I may, and welcome.
Thank you, Chairman today. Congratulations on being appointed Vice Chair and for taking on the mantle in the absence of Nikki Chopak, who, of course, I congratulate for taking on as Chair as well. Thank you very much. And welcome members, some of you who may not have been to a police and crime panel before. I think just in terms of, I appreciated the minute silence that we just had, and while some of us will have had different memories of Anne while we were in that minute silent, we certainly would have all had exactly the same about Kevin, and our thoughts are with his family and her family since we last met. As you are aware, we've had some we've got the update report in front of you. Quite a lot has happened in the last few weeks since this has been printed, so I'm just going to give you a few highlights and then take the report as read and be open to questions. I think, as you're aware, obviously we've had the killing of Anne Widdecombe since we were here together, and one of the things that I think is really important to just be really clear is, as you are aware, that counter-terrorism are now leading the investigation and treating it as a targeted attack. And I'm sure this will be unsettling for some of you, but I know our communities value our willingness as politicians to put ourselves in the public eye so that we can continue to try to make life better for the people we represent. I can reassure you the Chief Constable is reviewing the security arrangements provided to members of Parliament, and I am working with the Chief Constable to assess the implications of this tragedy for all of us who choose to serve by entering public life. And some of you will be aware of the arrangements for elected members, which is called Operation Ford, and some of your councils will have received letters from the Chief and I recently. As I said in the statement that I released earlier this week, you will have seen that there's been some questions raised in the media about the way the police has handled the case. So I just wanted to reiterate that I'm confident Devon and Cornwall Police has provided a substantial and professional response to the killing of Anne Widdecombe. Now I turn to today's business in relation to the update report. In the interest of time, as I said, I will just highlight a couple of things that are important for you to really take note. One is a technicality regarding the reissue of the medium-term financial strategy. It's attached in your paperwork. If you turn to page 14 in the update report, it gives you details of what's changed since January. If you recall, at the budget meeting, we didn't have the full financial settlement, and there's been a couple of different funding streams that came through late in the day, which have been clarified. It doesn't change the direction of travel. It doesn't change the decision around the council tax, and so it's in there as a technical amendment for you. Secondly, my update reports the highlights of the publication of the latest findings of His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue. And since that report was published, we have had yesterday's positive news from the Police Inspectorate. A year after Devon and Cornwall Police was taken out of special measures, a new inspection rating system puts the force 2 categories away from that position. Under the new police performance framework, the force finds itself in level 2, alongside 13 other forces in England and Wales. Being placed in level 2 means the force has been identified as having some and I quote, some low-level, non-systemic issues which are getting better but require oversight. Inspectors say the force is making continuous improvements, particularly in relation to its investigations. Being placed in this category is further recognition of the high regard that inspectors have for the leadership of Chief Constable James Vaughan, who they have previously described as, and I quote, an experienced Chief Constable who has contributed positively to the overall direction of the force and provided stability and clarity on what it needs to do to improve overall performance. I share that confidence in Mr. Vaughan, and I welcome his commitment to stay with the force for as long as is needed. Finally, I would like to acknowledge that many of you will have had mixed feelings about yesterday's government announcement on the creation of new councils in Devon. Some of you will be excited and others will feel unsettled, but I would like to say that I understand how you feel. As you know, policing is also undergoing a period of major change. Whoever leads these new authorities after May 2028, when police and crime commissioners are scrapped, will, we understand, have a role in scrutinising the work of the police. There is much to be finalised, but what I can reassure you is that I remain committed to my role and will ensure that the handover is as smooth and effective as possible. And then I'm happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you. Questions for the Commissioner? Councillor Czapierski, and then we'll come to you, Carolyn. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Czapierski, Mid-Devon District Council. Could you comment on the success of the Street Marshal scheme and how you see it progressing in the future? I appreciate there's some funding issues, and I'm particularly interested in the liaison not only with the police service but also with local councils. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the Street Marshals has been one of our particular successes here in Devon and Cornwall. It's been such a great collaboration with local authorities to create a uniformed presence in our communities where antisocial behaviour has been a challenge to address. And I believe at the moment we've been funding for a number of years in a number of towns and cities. As you will be aware, and part of the reason the medium-term financial strategy amendment that we've put in today, we didn't receive the hotspot policing that we had for the last 2 years, which has actually been propping up the funding of street marshals, where we did it in about 13 towns and cities to support. That funding is no longer available. I've committed to use the funds from my office in my reserves to fund the street marshals until September this year to support policing over the summer. But it is definitely something at the moment that I'm sure will be worrying you about what the next steps are.
Thank you very much. Caroline Jones.
Thank you. I just want to say well done to the Devon and Cornwall Police in terms of their peel inspection, but there's just one thing I wanted to pick up on, and I see in your report you've talked about the inadequates that you got. I know we need to look at how well you've done, but obviously with my safeguarding hat on, I'm very interested to understand the inadequate rating in terms of safeguarding children and vulnerable adults, and really what is the police force going to do about that to improve that?
Chair, if I may. The actual inspection results from peel are obviously quite disappointing. And you know in the performance framework that I have that I don't want any inadequates in any part of the services in Devon and Cornwall Police. They are being re-inspected in the next few months. So we are expecting to have some more results coming out soon. So bear with us on that as well. So there's a bit of re-inspection in some of the areas. In terms of safeguarding, I think one of the elements is that I receive an update at Commissioners Accountability Board from the Chief Constable, and I've got my next one on Wednesday next week, where he'll give me a running commentary of the work that they've been doing in relation to that area. What might be helpful is, if you're particularly interested in a subject matter, is to get the police to come and present their improvement plans in those areas. Because the more scrutiny as we move forward into the new arrangements, which will move to councillors rather than me, I think starting to have some of that might be helpful.
Councillor Lever.
Thank you. Thank you for your report, Alison. I want to return to the issue of street marshals, and I think there is no doubt that it's been really impactful in the towns where we've had those. Up in my neck of the woods, we've got them. I think we had some money from your office initially for Barnstable, but I don't think we have that now. So the service is being funded by the District Council and Barnstable Town Council, and also up in Ilfracombe. It has had a huge positive impact. One of the things that we've been able to do is to change the hours that the street marshals work, so it's not a regular pattern, because we found that there were gangs of shoplifters that waited until they finished work and then hit the town, so that they have a varied timetable for when they work, and that's been really helpful. I suppose my question is, I mean, it's great that you found some additional money to keep things going. We are all of us short of money, and I suppose I just wanted to give a quick shout out for whatever arrangements come forward in the future, that this is the sort of thing which we do not currently have money to carry forward into the future, but that we would like to, because it has such an impact on local communities and the confidence and the reducing fears of crime, particularly in the town centres. So I suppose it's a call out for all of us to advocate for this sort of action at national level, at whatever level, because it matters so much to communities. That's all. So it wasn't really a question in there, sorry.
I don't know if you want to comment on any of that, Commissioner. If not, we'll move on. It's entirely up to you.
And I suppose the one thing to comment on is and I've been told this by the national lead at the National Police Chiefs Council, who covers sort of local policing, is that we are an exemplar in the level of and the number of people that we give what's known as Community Safety Accreditation Scheme powers to. This is a delegated power from the Chief Constable. You're going to meet the tri-service officers in a short while. They also have those powers. We are unusual as a police service that has delivered so much collaboration with local councils. I think Thames Valley is the only one that does it almost as a sort of similar extent, but it's hardly used elsewhere. So I think championing it nationally to government to understand that it's about more than just police officers, I think would be helpful, especially as we go through police reform. And I think one of the opportunities with local authorities sort of overseeing policing is you sort of have more ability to liaise direct with the police around some of those things.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor Lever?
Yeah, thank you very much. One of the many, many other hats I wear is I sit on one of the policy committees at the Local Government Association, which is snappily entitled the Public Service Reform and Innovation Committee, honestly. So in our work programme coming up for the coming year, it is to be looking at the police reform bill that will come forward. It would be interesting perhaps for us to have a conversation to make sure that I'm well informed to represent the good stuff that's been happening here from the LGA's point of view.
Well, I'm sure we can do that offline. Absolutely, brilliant. Okay, just to let you know, panel, I now have Councillors Steele, then Hackett, then Penberthy in that order. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, I'd like to dig into a bit more depth on those two inadequate ratings that were flagged. So what specific performance expectations have you set for the Chief Constable, and by what dates must those improvements be demonstrated, specifically given you were saying that they're going to be re-investigated or re-inspected over the next few months? And what additional scrutiny arrangements have you put in place following those two inadequate grades beyond any business as usual accountability mechanisms?
Thank you, Chair. There's been quite a bit of learning of Devon and Cornwall Police being when it went into special measures, in that I wanted them out of it in 6 months. And then until you realise from the inspectorate the sort of level of detail that they've gone into with some of the challenges that they've identified within the police, they're a very good, useful tool for me as a commissioner to better understand how policing works, because I am not allowed to inspect. I have no inspection powers whatsoever, and that is one of the things I've been championing to try and get police and crime commissioners the ability to inspect, but that has not been allowed. And one of the recognitions is in terms of the time it takes to actually make some of those systemic changes. You can do quick performance sticking plaster stuff quite quickly. And in spending a lot of time with His Majesty's Inspectorate and learning from other police forces that were in similar positions, I had to learn strategic patience, which, you know, as a politician is quite frustrating, knowing that it will take potentially 2 years to turn around the force from some of its ratings. So the bit that's particularly important is, if you recall, when I appointed the Chief Constable, James Vaughan, to come in and actually drive that performance in the force. He took it out of special measures within quite a quick period of time, after quite a lot of work by the force itself, but took it out of that at the moment. The ratings that are happening at the moment, particularly in relation to investigations, there's a few bits. My team go to the Forces Performance Board and understand the issues that are being discussed in relation to why the performance is the way it is, and asking challenging questions or feeding that back in as intelligence to me on what I need to be looking at and asking of the Chief Constable. In particular, we've got you'll see on the performance report, I've got additional scrutiny that I've brought in relation to investigations, and I've got that next Wednesday at Commissioners Accountability Board. While you might say, what am I doing outside of business as usual normal governance, that governance is really useful to do it, and I can only do some of the things through a formal governance arrangement. Besides supporting the Chief Constable with any resources that he may require to carry out those improvements, we've also worked very closely with the College of Policing and brought in additional support for the Chief and his staff to enable them to really sort of drive forward on that. So I think ensuring that the Chief is taking up the opportunities being given to him through the process of the inspectorate. By building strong, trusting relationships with the inspectorate has been really key. What you may not be aware of is that Devon and Cornwall Police was quite defensive when they first were before we went into special measures. Couldn't believe they were in that performance situation, and being defensive and trying to fight it is not the way to make improvement happen in the organisation. So we've had some cultural changes and challenges that we need to overcome as well, which I've supported James as the chief that's come in to try and drive that to be able to succeed. I think the main thing at the moment is the fact that we are lucky that James is not going to be going anywhere anytime soon and is willing to stay. I think instability in this force is the bit that will actually make it drop back in performance. So I think me having a strong relationship with the chief, supporting him wherever I can, and making sure that he doesn't fall over, trying to drag the performance of that organisation is a key thing that I have to spend my time doing. So I speak to the Chief Constable daily. And we have lots of informal conversations about what we can do together, what scrutiny he might find helpful for me to look at, or I might suggest to him that I want to do, but the timing might not be right, and we negotiate. So there's lots of informal conversations, but I think largely it's about making sure that the inspectorate are really closely aligned with the force, because they come and they attend performance meetings as well. And we've got, like I say, a couple of further bits of inspection happening over the next couple of months, which we'll see the results of published soon.
So, Commissioner, do you feel with all the things that you've outlined there that you're on track to see some improvement in the next re-inspection? Will that be in your next report to us in September, telling us how there's been improvement since the last inspection?
I'm not sure it'll be published by the time we have the next panel, so there may be a verbal update. It's just about when they do it and when they publish it. There's always quite a time lag. I'm confident from seeing the improvement journey and my team being involved in being part of the governance of policing to try and oversee some of it as well. I'm confident that they're definitely going in the right direction, and the regional liaison inspector who works with our force is very confident about the way in which we're moving. So, you know, the word confident means that you sort of trust the plans are right, you've scrutinised and you're clear it's going in the right direction, and you're checking your milestones that you are meeting them and it is moving forward. So there's some detailed plans in place, and I am assured that it is definitely going in the right direction. If I could do it faster, I would want that. But if it's systemic and you've got these long-term challenges, it does take a little bit longer, I'm afraid.
That's fine, thank you, Commissioner. I'm confident that Councillor Steele will be asking that question again in future anyway, so we're all confident, that's good. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to refer back to the tragic murder of Right Honourable Anne Widdicombe. Devon and Cornwall Police gave an initial robust assurance that it was not terrorist related when the first suspect was arrested, subsequently released. And when the current suspect has been arrested, I believe Yorkshire Police very quickly established that the counter-terrorism unit should be involved. Specifically, how could Devon and Cornwall Police discount terrorism at a very early stage in the inquiry? And I'd like a better understanding of when they only had a partial view of the facts, they could make that comment on such a horrific murder.
Chair, I will be careful not to comment on operational matters, but there will be a couple of things that I will happily reiterate that I've said in the public domain. Firstly, the counter-terrorism have been involved since day one. As soon as it was known, it was day one. So they've been alongside Devon and Cornwall Police from the very beginning. They haven't just flown in at the end. I just want to be really clear about that. They've been alongside Devon and Cornwall Police from the beginning. And I've had assurance from the head of counter-terrorism, Lawrence Taylor, spoken to him directly, that there's been a smooth handover to the leadership of the investigation now, in light of new evidence, that it is in relation to counter-terrorism. Yet to be charged with any offences, though, so we await and see. They can hold the individual for up to 7 days, so we may hear something within the next few days.
Happy to come back to you, Councillor Hackett, on
Yes.
scrutiny matters, yeah.
Okay, would it not have been better to remain silent about the issue of counter-terrorism until the facts were properly analysed? I think that would have been a better way forward, to remain silent until something had been established, rather than give a robust comment that it was not terrorist-related. That's what concerns me.
I think you've been heard. I think the Commissioner is deliberately staying quiet on that because it's probably an operational matter and an operational decision. But I think your question and your dissatisfaction at how that has come out is well heard. I think that's probably the fairest response. I've got you on the list, Councillor, yes. Next speaker is... Sorry, did you want to...
Point of clarification.
Of course, yes, in which case come in now. I do apologise. Councillor Poll, come in now if it's a clarification.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, the report that I read said that the force had no information at that time to indicate that it was a terrorist incident, rather than that it was not a terrorist incident. So just as a point of clarification, it was a sort of double negative as opposed to a positive, if you see.
I thank you. I think we've had a good hearing on that, and I think Councillor Hackett's been able to ask his question, and I think he's been able to make his point. So we'll move on. Councillor Penberthy.
Thank you. I've got a whole load of questions as ever, but I'd like to go back to safeguarding because I think safeguarding is really important. And in addressing Councillor Steele's question, you talked about investigations, not safeguarding, and quite often we've heard a lot about investigations, not safeguarding. As councillors, safeguarding matters to all of us. And so I was really wanting to see whether there is yet a clear strategy that people can see to address the specific safeguarding failings that have been identified in the reports in relation both to vulnerable adults and to children. We need to know what that strategy includes, and we need to know how partners are involved in shaping and delivering improvements, because safeguarding is a multi-agency responsibility. And the fact that you've not mentioned it, I have some concerns about. So at the moment, I would like assurances that that clear strategy is in place and it is a multi-agency strategy. And secondly, I'd like us to know that that multi-agency strategy has been shared with the other agencies and responsible partners. And the reason I'm asking that is that I've been briefed this week that seems to indicate that that isn't the case at the moment. And I think that's a strategic issue for you, because it is the strategic partnership between the police and other statutory partners that make safeguarding happen. And I think that is something that we can't shy away from, and it would be wrong of us to shy away from in this meeting just because it's awkward to address.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of things in relation to the safeguarding side. Firstly, this is the first Chief Constable I've had that I've worked with that speaks about safeguarding to me. That's before the inspection, as soon as he arrived, took clear responsibility for safeguarding and his duties, and has actually leads the Plymouth safeguarding arrangements. So he's very personally hands-on involved and works across all 4 upper-tier authorities in relation to it. First time I've ever had a Chief Constable speak to me about it. So I'm confident that there's a strong leadership in relation to that particular area. One of the elements in the Peel report around safeguarding is around the way in which they risk assess victims and perpetrators of domestic abuse. And they are really now trying to explore how they can do that better. I am aware of some arrangements that they've got in place for new technology to help with some of that. And they've just received... no, that's to do with investigations. Sorry, redaction software, that's to do with investigations. But they are having to work through how they are not leaving people in. There's high, medium and low risk domestic abuse, and there's a lot in the medium risk. A lot of officers are too afraid to put them in low. They don't quite reach a high threshold, and then there's this bulk in the middle of medium, and they really do need to sort out how confident they are that those medium risk are being dealt with appropriately. And one of the things that we've established, and we've got some funding opportunity to apply for from the government, thank you, which is to do with perpetrator funding in particular. But we're really keen to see, we've got something called the CARA model for low-risk domestic abuse. And actually, there were some who were in the medium risk who would do well to do a CARA, but they're not allowed because they're in the medium risk. So we're looking at what can we deliver to some of those that are relevant in the medium risk, and we're looking to explore some of that funding. It's quite a few million we could potentially apply for. My team are on the case at the moment, and the deadline is the end of this month to get something in. And we are working with partners and the voluntary sector in this space to really add some value to the policing performance in relation to that.
Thanks, and I have other questions around domestic abuse, which I don't want to confuse with safeguarding because they are different, though related topics. Chair, I think this is really important, and whilst we've heard the Commissioner's answer, it doesn't really give us that strategic, it's what, what the strategic plan is to address that. I wonder whether we could put safeguarding on as a future agenda item quickly, not slowly, because I think every single local authority needs to know that that's there, and the public need to know that we're working in concert and are able to have scrutiny of that. So I'd welcome that, and I noticed the Commissioner nodding. I'll put my hand up for other questions rather than going on to other topics.
Chair, just bear in mind, I think that's not, that's a good idea. Bear in mind, I have no statutory duty, so we'll just work through what we can bring and how it will be helpful to you in relation to that agenda item.
I think given that it's ranking within the report, there must be some strategic level role for you to play in that.
Absolutely, and it sounds like we want to be getting that onto a forward plan quickly rather than slowly. Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Councillor Beverley. I'll go to Barry Jones, and then unless I have any other names on the list, I'll come back to you.
Hi, it was a question about investigations. Were you doing a deep dive into the issues related to investigations? You were. And that's going to come forward shortly, isn't it? Your analysis. You said you don't inspect, but you do analyse it.
Yeah, Chair. At the moment, as I said, next Wednesday, we've got investigation outcomes. So I'm looking at the results of their investigations, and I want to see an improvement in the results. How they go about doing that is up to the Chief in terms of his processes.
This is your department has done the analysis, hasn't it? Is that right or not?
No, I'm asking the Chief to bring the information about it for me to scrutinise next Wednesday. But my team have also done some scrutiny on file quality. Sorry, that's the one that you're probably thinking of. About 18 months ago now, a very deep dive into file quality of investigations, and we found it woeful. So we found that it wasn't very good, the training wasn't very good, the quality of the product wasn't very good, and there's been a dramatic improvement. In fact, Devon and Cornwall Police at the time were second bottom in the country to the Met for file quality as a percentage of files that met the threshold. They're now much more in the mid to moving up to the top quartile of the table now. They have dramatically improved their file quality performance.
Okay, what I wanted to know was that when you did that analysis, was it regional, some of the issues, or was it across the force?
Largely, the deep dive that we did, largely what we found was it was a corporate response to the problem that wasn't tailored to the needs of the staff working in the department. So we only looked at Devon and Cornwall. Obviously, CPS are regional, the Crown Prosecution Service. They helped lead with us some of that scrutiny and the improvement plan afterwards. And I want to thank Vicky Cook, actually, for her personal leadership on that with me, with the acting Chief Constable at the time. But largely, it is to do with the clunky bureaucratic processes and the poor training that was given to officers.
I can't see any more hands at the moment, so back to you, Councillor Pemberley.
Thanks, and I'll switch between this and the next report because there's quite a lot. But on this one, I would like to pick up on domestic abuse because obviously there were concerns raised in the inspection around domestic abuse, and that matters, VOG matters, and in Plymouth we know that we have a disproportionately high level of domestic abuse, and seeing where your The sources are predominantly going, they're predominantly not in Plymouth at the moment. So I wondered what improvements have been made in terms of domestic abuse investigations, and how you are assuring yourself that those improvements are really hitting Plymouth, which is the domestic abuse hotspot of your patch, and actually is an outlier nationally in terms of the levels of domestic abuse happening. I think this really matters. If we're going to tackle VORG, we need to be tackling domestic abuse well. And whilst it's great to be doing things in the rest of the patch, if we're not tackling it where it's highest, we're letting women and their children down, and that can't carry on. So I'd like your assurance about how you're ensuring that stuff is happening here as well as in the rest of the patch, and that those concerns raised in the investigation are being properly addressed at an operational level. Thank you.
Chair, well, I think you'll be delighted to know that probably Plymouth was the first to have a women's centre and specific housing to support women as well who are in recovery from abuse and also addiction. But you've had some outstanding support and delivery within the city. One of the things, and we now have a women's centre Cornwall, and there's an ambition to have one for the rest of Devon. So I think that the voluntary sector have mobilised really well in this space to support women, and Plymouth have been definitely at the forefront, where you've got Trevi House, and you've also got Sunflower House and a range of other issues that Plymouth has been on the ball of for many years. One of the things that my office delivers is the contracts around independent sexual violence advisors and independent domestic violence advisors, and they will hold the hand of victims and support them through the criminal justice process. That has been, we probably started introducing them about, I'm going to say about 5-6 years ago, and then the government, when this new government says you absolutely must have some and you must have this many, and actually really encouraged us to firm up that. And we've just had a new sexual violence contract that has recently been announced, which I think you'll have seen in the budget arrangements. It's quite a large contract over 5 years, and thank you, because local authorities have worked alongside my office with NHS England to deliver quite a holistic contract to support women who are victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence. So really pleased to see that. The other thing in relation to Plymouth in particular, we obviously have my victim care service that I fund and spend. I'm probably one of the highest, I fund the most support services than any other commissioner in the country pretty much, which is why when the government started looking at what the offices of the Police and Crime Commissioner do, we looked a bit like an outlier. We spend millions on support services for people in that space, but clearly it's not making a difference. Clearly, we've still got issues around domestic abuse. Clearly, it's on the rise, it's never on the reduction. So that's why my focus has been disrupting violence against women and girls and focusing on more of the offender arrangement, or men, than it has been about focusing on women. So we've started, and while it is in Cornwall, Councillor Penberthy, please be aware it will be coming to Plymouth and Devon, but the male allyship that we're launching next week down in Wadebridge, which the former High Sheriff of Cornwall has led with us, which is to get men to step up alongside women and start talking about things in this space to help challenging the behaviour of men and to help support women, not be the ones having the battle. So we're excited about that. We've got the Cornish Pirates on board who we're working closely with, and we want men in Cornwall to step up and say, I will be a male ally. And that will, once we've got that one off the ground, we will start to spread into Devon. But I know that Plymouth Argyle work hard in this space. In fact, they're leaders. They work with my office. They've been going into schools and they've been doing talks about consent. They've been exemplary, actually, Plymouth Argyle. And so there are things going on, but in the wider space rather than just policing.
Thank you for recognising everything that's going on in Plymouth. The council's been very happy to fund this for a very long time. Trevi has been going on for many years, and it is Dawn French's late mother who has established that. We are doing a lot. We've actually got men's services in the city. We've been running male perpetrator schemes for decades here through a HIMSA with funding from the council. So I think I'm not saying that services aren't there, But I am saying that reporting of domestic abuse is high. The inspection identified concerns regarding domestic abuse investigations. That's not the voluntary and community sector, it's not councils, it's not other partners, it's not the health service, that is the police. And what I was saying was, how can you assure yourself that the police role in that, the investigation role in that, the taking people to court, gaining convictions, actually putting out that message as well is happening? Because unless that's happening, we as the councils and voluntary and community sector, who we all rely on very heavily and we fund very heavily, are still not going to be seeing that other side, which is really important for people to see as well. Women need to know that they're being protected by the police. So what improvements have been made following the concerns regarding domestic abuse investigations, and how are you assuring yourselves that those investigations and those changes are making an impact? That's a strategic question, and I welcome all the rest, but it's here about what the police are doing. If you don't have an answer, say we'll find out, and I will ask for that to go on the work programme as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. First thing, I'll do the a simple one, which is the Deputy Chief Constable's taken the lead on the performance on this particular space as a senior leader in the force. The Chief is signing up to be a male ally next week. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's woeful. What's woeful, and I'll tell you what's woeful, is women getting blamed for the abuse from men. They are losing their children. They are living lives and getting the blame, especially if drugs or alcohol is involved. I've met many victims who have suffered, and at the end of the day, it ends up being the woman who loses her child, the mother of the child, rather than the man being stopped. And this is an actual major issue nationally, but Devon and Cornwall Police's investigations aren't good enough. But it is woeful what happens to women in this process, and they are blamed, still blamed today, for it being their fault that they are being abused because they keep going back to the perpetrator. And I'm fed up of it, absolutely fed up of it, fed up of hearing it and fed up of seeing it. And this isn't just policing, this is all of our multi-agency arrangements. I'm going to give you an example of a victim that was in Plymouth that had been sexually assaulted and abused by her husband or her partner, the father of her child, multiple times, and she rang the police every single time. She withdrew her support for a prosecution, so the police didn't prosecute. And then this is not unusual for women who are victims of domestic abuse to withdraw their support because they're A, frightened, and B, still actually weirdly care for them, but they do. It's the father of her child. And this woman now is at the stage where she's under an investigation because she might have done something and her child's been adopted. This is outrageous. She's been blamed for her child not being safeguarded because he won't leave her alone. This is what we need to change. This is a real issue for us in society, and this is why I'm working to disrupt and work with the community to actually change the way that we view things. I am sick of victim blaming, and it is massively happening in this space, especially if women have substance abuse issues, because she was drunk, because she was on drugs, because she went back to him. We've got to stop the victim blaming, Councillor Penberthy, and I'm afraid it's rife in society, and the investigation outcomes for Devon and Cornwall Police are woeful and not good enough.
So Commissioner, if they're woeful and not good enough, are you saying that we haven't made the improvements, so we need it on the forward plan?
I'm happy for you to have safeguarding and domestic abuse on the forward plan around it. These are serious issues that I think we should expose in the public domain.
Because everything you've just said, everyone around this table will entirely agree with. But the question, and I will bring you back to the question because I think it's only fair, the question was what improvements have been made and the strategic impact. So if Councillor Penberthy said he's happy that it goes on the forward plan, but it needs to go on it as a matter of urgency.
And as I'm now the Cabinet Member with responsibility for community safety in Plymouth and Vorg, I want to make it clear that for many years I have been saying that women should not be dealing with trying to solve the problem of violence against women and girls. That's a men's issue. I've made it clear in lots of arenas when I was the Deputy Lord Mayor, on Lord Mayor's Day, that's the speech I made in the middle of the city centre, because men need to take responsibility. One of the ways we get men to take responsibility is men to see there are consequences. And the consequences that men will see most visibly are when they're standing in a dock, in a court, and facing stuff. We need to support the women all the way through. Women aren't the victims. I think women should stay in their homes, not men. I think men should be penalised. I think their employers should know about it. I think men should be really gutted for the way that they treat women at times. And that is not acceptable that society does it. But in the meantime, police investigation matters. That's why I've asked for it. And I just wanted to say, you're outraged, I'm outraged, lots of us are outraged, we've got to do something. We can all do our bit. This is the one bit that you could do, as well as disruption, but this is the one bit that would really disrupt, when men knew there were consequences to their actions. And I want to see men facing consequences for the way they treat women.
So the passion on both sides is entirely justified, but I just come back to the point, which is that what we actually want to do is we want to make sure, as a panel, that we are seeing the necessary improvements. I'll come to you on the list. I will come to you on the list. Your hand's up, that's fine. I'm going to go to Councillor Hackett next, then I'll come to you, Councillor Poll. Okay, Councillor Hackett.
Thank you again, Chair. I'm turning to page 17, reducing harm on our roads. I'm not expecting an answer now, but I would like an answer to come back fairly shortly. The Commissioner may be aware of the number of serious and fatal accidents happening in the Holsworthy, Oakhampton, Howell area. We've had fatalities and serious injuries recently, and this has come as no surprise to me. There are a number of, shall we say, weekend motorcycle time trials been going on in that area around Cookworthy Woods. Could we ensure that action is taken? We as members are aware that every few hundred yards we appear to go through speed cameras and traffic cameras here. We need something in the rural areas as well, because we are suffering fatalities here and we need something addressed. Could you come back to me before the next meeting? The AO372 and the AO379 are the particular ones I'm concerned with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate, Chairman,
Commissioner, I was just going to say, Councillor Hackett's not asked for an answer today. Vision Zero is on the next agenda, so perhaps he could have his answers as part of that agenda item. That would probably make sense, and then we can deal with it fully at the next meeting, and then you haven't got to worry about answering now. Is that okay? Councillor Poll.
So just to follow up on Councillor Pemberley's last point, I'm just wondering, in the spirit of that, on the next agenda item, whether we can consider a proposal to refer to the issue as men's violence against women and girls, because the men is missing from that topic. And if we're going to have a strategy that's looking at male allyship in the forefront, then I think having men in the syntax of that problem would be quite helpful.
That's for the next agenda. Yeah, okay.
Been noted for the purpose of
yes, it has been
in the report.
And it has been. Thank you, Councillor Lever.
I think I'm actually carrying on from, I'm afraid I can't see your name, Councillor Poll. Thank you very much. And actually, in relation to violence against women and girls, I think we all recognise that this is a national and probably international issue. But I would just like it that if we're talking about this, or we've got a report coming for the next meeting, that we also think about actually what's happening, particularly for our young people, and what's happening online and what they get it through their phones. And I know that government's trying to do something about social media and so on and so forth, but actually there's an awful lot of misogyny that's being pumped out there for young boys, and an awful lot of self-deprecation and stuff that goes to girls, which is about reducing self-worth, and that feeds into this as well. And the other thing I think I'd like to just point out is, of course, not all men are perpetrating crimes of any kind against women, and that the good men out there, thank you all very much, and I very much appreciate the work that is going on to support men to stand up and put their hands up and say, yeah, I'm an ally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lever. So it sounds like we're looking at having the Tate effect involved in the work there. I think that's noted. Thank you. Councillor Hodgetts.
Yeah, on Cornwall Council, we've got a cross-party working group looking at violence against women and girls.
Councillor Hodgetts, can you talk a bit closer to your microphone for Councillor Lever, please?
In Cornwall Council, we've got a cross-party working group looking at violence against women and girls, and I am on that, so I'm with you. As a gay man, there is another issue here because I have also been a victim of domestic abuse and violence.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions on this agenda item, members? No, it looks like we're done. Okay. So, panel, you are asked to note the report. And it is duly noted. Okay. We will move on to agenda item 8, which is the draft annual report 2025-26. Commissioner, before you talk us through the report, just for the benefit of members, you will have had an email from the officer team just advising you, and I think it's just worth pointing out that scrutiny of the annual report should pick up on 3 specific issues, which are understanding whether the objectives set out in the police and crime plan have been met, using your own insight and your own independently gathered evidence to evaluate whether the Commissioner's conclusions on this matter are robust, and supporting the Commissioner to hold the Chief Constable to account on operational delivery. So with that in mind, over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief with just an introduction. I think the first thing is, and those who have been here before, you influence my annual report. There's sometimes things missing. There's sometimes things that you'd like to see in there that isn't. And if the panel would like a bigger section as well, we've often done pieces of work in there to promote the work of the panel in a bigger section. So I'm happy to take feedback as well. And I think the main thing for me is it's been a productive year, if not challenging as always. We all have a challenging environment in public service. And together with the Chief Constable and many other partners, we've strengthened our neighbourhood policing, returned more officers to frontline duties through Operation Resolve, improved emergency and non-emergency call handling, and I thank the panel for recognising that by writing to the Chief Constable when that performance had improved and stabilised, and supported almost 32,000 victims through commissioned services, which, you think is quite overwhelming. These are real achievements that make a difference to people's lives. And I was just visiting Devon rape crisis on Wednesday, and really uplifting how they're helping people, and the support that is available to help people move on with their lives is outstanding. And I was really delighted that we've got that service and where they want to take it over in future years. But this report is much more than just about statistics. It's about safer communities. It's about tackling antisocial behaviour through hotspot policing, investing in CCTV, and I know I've given out quite a lot of grant awards over in the last financial year to many councils and parishes wanting an improvement to their CCTV. The investment in night buses with local authorities, thank you very much, getting us to an ability to have safe and affordable ways to get home on a night out. Confronting violence against women and girls with new and innovative approaches, and I'm not afraid to be radical and put my head above the parapet. I'm trying a few things at the moment that may come out in due course, and ensuring that those affected by crime receive the support that they deserve, because one of our challenges when we focus on particular types of crime is other types of crime might get missed, and your simple and straightforward burglary victim, your simple and straightforward business who's having shop theft happening to them continually. They all need the support that we can give them, and I will try anything in my power that I can do to support them. As you know here, councillors, that policing doesn't solve many problems on its own. It's largely with partners, and it is alongside our community, and our communities are fantastic. They are largely law-abiding. They do give information to the police to help resolve things. In fact, they're so keen to give information to the police, they want it acted on immediately, and this is some of the frustrations that our community feels, that some things take time. I think as policing prepares for significant national reform over the coming years, there'll only be I'm just thinking there'll be one more of these annual reports before the end of the term of office, and whatever the new arrangements will be, I'm assuming they will. I would assume they would still have to do an annual report. They would be producing that final one in terms of it. But I'd like to thank officers, staff, volunteers, partners, and most importantly, the people of Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly for the continued support, challenge, engagement, and I would also say in particular for recognising that we have challenges that I think we didn't want to face in the past that we are now starting to, and it's partly the whole idea of male violence against women and girls. I'll say that, Councillor Poll, to be really clear, male violence against women and girls, in fact women and children, and we're really, you can see, because the government has taken that seriously, they want to see a reduction in 50% reduction in 10 years, and they are trying to mobilise every resource that they can to help us in our local area. They're trying to do at a government level. So huge changes in this past sort of year or so.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have Councillor Lever, then I'll come to you, Councillor Poll.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for this draft report. I'm just looking at the page that's got year in numbers. Nice to have things nice and clearly laid out like that. But looking at this, it gives me no understanding of how this year compares with previous years. So, we've had all the outcomes that relate to these figures. So, for example, we've got 128 visits made by independent custody visitors in 2025-26. Were there more than that the previous year? Were there fewer than that? Does it impact on anything? I'm also struck by the over 1 million vehicles checked by Vision Zero Southwest for mobile phone and seatbelt offences from July to December 2025. Do we have any idea about whether the compliance has improved over the period of the Vision Zero? It's that sort of, how do we make sense of what these figures are telling us question, really.
Chair, Councillor Lever makes a very good point about showing over a period of time, so I will take that back, because don't forget, you have a performance report here at every meeting. We could at least put look at the whole performance over the whole year to put in here as a minimum. So I will take that away as feedback. Thank you. And just in terms of it looks a bit scary, the 1 million vehicles checked, but a lot of this is community speedwatch. The bulk of a lot of the checking, a lot of it is done through community speedwatch. And so, of course, you get up to a letter, you get an escalation process. And one of the things, and I know Councillor Thomas, as chair, who is on Vision Zero alongside me, will know that we actually reduced the level of income in Vision Zero last year because of the level of compliance that's happening. So there are changes, but we'll address that at a future agenda item.
Thank you very much. Councillor Poll.
Sorry, yeah, so my question's also about the same page. So we hear reports in Exeter that there are recruitment and retention problems around PCSOs. So again, it's sort of hard to know with that number of 176 standing alone, sort of out of context, whether that's a good number or not. But yeah, just wondered whether that same problem with recruitment and retention of PCSOs is happening across the force, or whether it's a sort of localised issue, and what at a sort of strategic level can be done to improve, because it takes a lot of time. We lose a lot of PCSO time if the recruitment process fails, and I imagine it's quite an expensive failure when it happens as well.
Chair, if I may, panel members who've been here a while will recall we went down to 150 PCSOs on this patch, reduced from 360 when I first took office as part of the austerity measures and prioritising the recruitment of police officers over any police staff. So we're 26 up from where we were only a year or so ago. There's been a massive recruitment of police police community support officers in this past year, thanks to the neighbourhood policing grant from the government that says you can recruit more neighbourhood officers. We've been trying to get tri-service safety officers recognised as a neighbourhood officer, but the government don't recognise them as that, so we can't recruit them through that channel. So we have had an increase in PCSOs. There is more recruitment plans in place. We do have a challenge with having enough wanting to apply, so it seems to be a slower process at the moment, but when they're in, they don't tend to leave. PCSOs is probably the higher retained area. Unless they want to become police officers, largely PCSOs stay for quite a long time. So our challenge at the moment is please promote it when you see anything around PCSOs wanting to be recruited. And secondly, the problem we've got is often, and this is a financial one, and you'll understand this as local authorities, sometimes you have to wait until enough PCSOs have left in order to do a course in PCSOs. So we don't just recruit the odd one or two when someone leaves, and that's why you can have that huge gap between someone retiring or moving on to being a police officer, which is often does happen, but many stay as PCSOs. The gap will be because we need enough to do a course, and that's not helpful. So I have talked to the force before about how can we do it with half-size courses, how can we fit that in around it. And now we're not doing such a high level of recruitment of police officers as we were. There is an ability to do things slightly differently at the moment. So, and we've got a huge number of police transferees coming in from other police forces. First time in a long time that so many, about 150 are coming from other police forces. Largely because, again, when the government did the 20,000 uplift, it was a bit of a gentleman's agreement not to poach everybody else from everybody else's forces, because you're just robbing Peter to pay Paul all the time. So at the moment, we've got a big transferee coming, which don't need as much training either, because they're already trained police officers. So there's some changes going on in the Learning and Development Department about how we move forward in some of those things. But the delay, I'm afraid, is because they usually wait for the right number to have a course. So it is painful.
Yeah, so I sort of get the impression from your answer that the problems that we're hearing about in Exeter may be localised to Exeter, and because we have got some Pride in Place funding in Exeter, and I've even had the comment back from officers that it wouldn't be a good use of that money to sort of support an extra PCSO because of the recruitment and retention problems that we've seen, and so that just seems like quite a sort of big problem, you know. So it just seems like what you're saying is that it isn't a problem generally, and that it may be just a sort of localised one.
Chair, I would encourage you to contact me outside of this meeting about that specific problem, and I can go and check if it is a specific problem or it is wider. So I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Pemberley.
Thank you. As there are a few areas of questioning, I'll do the first and then go back to the bottom of the list. I'd like to start on antisocial behaviour, if I may, because I know that's something that affects a lot of us. Looking at page either 21 or 81, depending which pack you've got in front of you, there were just over 5,000 ASB incident attendances, 663 stop searches, really good news in terms of hotspot policing, 499 arrests, which is a very small proportion, and then no news at all about the outcomes of that. So did 499 people walk free? Did they end up in court? How many people were successfully prosecuted? I think it tells part of a story, and it would be useful maybe to see that progression on from over 5,000 to just under 500 to what? Was it 5? What proportion? Because we need to instill confidence in people, because they say it's not worth reporting ASB because it doesn't get dealt with. And part of that, I think, relates specifically to hotspot policing. I was lucky enough to have a number of them in my own ward. Lucky enough, that's because my ward is an ASB and crime hotspot in Devon and Cornwall, and the Isles are silly. So, not necessarily for good reasons. What was noticed was once that sort of visits as part of a programme stopped and it became business as usual, is that antisocial behaviour has started creeping up again. In fact, we've got an ASB review going on at the moment in one of the hotspot areas, because since it changed to become business as usual, all the problems have just come back again. So it's great to see that, but we're not seeing there the outcomes, and business as usual hasn't been business as usual. And I think at a strategic level, you need to be thinking about if ASB approaches are business as usual and they're not business as usual, what that means for the assurances you're able to give to people in those ASB hotspots, because they inevitably suck a lot of resource from a lot of people, and if we can tackle it, that releases resource to do other things.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased you've been able to see what it looks like when you get that extra resource. And if you recall, it would have been about 2 years ago now, an acting chief Jim Cornwall at the time said that he was going to make hotspot policing business as usual back then. Then we got the money again for another year, and it was funded and it was solid. And then it's saying it's going back to business as usual. I think there's some scrutiny. I'm thinking about, now you're saying that out loud, about how many, so that I can check what are they doing. Because at the moment with the hotspot policing, there is a project management resource funded around that. There is technology that has been funded around that, and it's, because the money's not there, that moves away again, doesn't it? So I need to go and have a look about how could we better understand whether they're doing it as business as usual. I will take that away, in particular, that one. In terms of the, just to say about the arrests, it is one of the most frustrating things I find is even when I'm going to look at investigation outcomes, which is the results of arrests, has someone been charged, has someone had a deferred charge, has somebody been convicted, when I look at that on next Wednesday, one of the things that I'm going to get frustrated about is you're showing me the data today, the answer, but these could have been arrests linked to 2 years ago. So you never get a real picture of what that performance looks like unless you can follow every single case, and it's really frustrating. It's one of my bugbears, but I get the point that you're saying about you cannot tell whether the outcomes it's making a difference. But you can feel the difference and see the difference when there's that activity going on, but is it really making a difference? I think the biggest one for me is I've had antisocial behaviour as a priority in the police and crime plan since I took office, and it's still a problem. And one of the things I recognise is it will never go away, because if you talk about young people, that young people cohort moves on, and then another young people cohort comes up behind. So it is a continual thing that we will have to be persistent on, a bit like parking outside of schools. It is an annual problem when new parents come to that school who then decide to park in the wrong place. It is one of these things that I think we will always be addressing, but one of the things that this government has introduced is these respect orders, and this is something that we will be exploring. They come into effect in October, and at the moment most of the ability around those arrests will have been crime related. A lot of antisocial behaviour is behaviour related. The respect orders turn what is a civil offence into a potentially arrestable offence. So we will be exploring that a little bit further as over the next few months with our antisocial behaviour lawyers, and see whether they're added value to what is already there with community protection warnings and notices.
Thanks. It's good to see the work in Torquay and Camborne on the street focus. Just wondered whether there's an opportunity for discussion about Plymouth. I'm just thinking around, especially the city centre and Stonehouse neighbourhoods where ASB levels are high, either because of the city centre, the nature of Stonehouse residents, or the fact it's the predominance of the waterfront. And we've had massive spikes recently in waterfront ASB. So it's just, if there is an opportunity for a Plymouth discussion around what a street focus would look like to help us tackle ASB in some of those hotspots, that would be really appreciated.
Chair, just to make you maybe feel a little bit reassured about that, Councillor Penberthy, the knife crime concentration fund that we got from the government this year does have Plymouth. So we've only got, if you like, three particular towns or cities which are hotspot areas for knife crime concentration fund, but it's about high visibility, stop and search, and prevention activity. So Plymouth is one of them, Torbay is another, and Exeter is the other. But just to reassure you, there is some focus there. Yeah,
I was thinking of the ASB, we've had harbour masters and harbour owners and all sorts of other people. The waterfront ASB is verging on the criminal, but not quite. So we've had police, we've got a lot of work going on, but it's sucking a lot of resource in. So if we're able to do something in that more structured way, I think we would welcome that, because it might help us all use our resource better and bring partners together in a really positive way. So it's just an offer if you wanted to have that discussion with us.
Excellent. Offered, I think, there. Okay, I now have councillors Steele, Hackett, Chapiowski and Cador. And Councillor Beverley, have you got more to... I'll bring you in and out, as it were. Okay, thanks. Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure the Commissioner will agree, having been a former councillor herself, that the vital role that councillors play in engaging with their residents and engaging with their local police teams on tackling antisocial behaviour. So I would like to ask her, do you think that your neighbourhood policing teams are engaging consistently with local councils across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly? And how is the effectiveness of that engagement being measured in terms of reducing the ASB and improving community confidence across the force area?
Thank you, Chair. I suppose, firstly, I completely recognise the importance of local councillors in all of our community safety. I've established the Councillor Advocate Scheme, which we were the only Office of Police and Crime Commissioner in the country that had one. It was all about after austerity, when policing retracted from local councils, didn't come and do their reports to parish councils, that people started to get neglected and they didn't feel informed. So the Councillor Advocate Scheme is something that any councillor at any level of local authority is able to join, and they get a quarterly, as a minimum, there's minimum standard, a quarterly meeting with the local inspector for their area so they can formally raise issues. How you build that relationship from that quarterly minimum is up to you, and it is completely different across the patch. So if you work well with your inspector and support your inspector, they're often happy to speak to you regularly. If it's not that type of relationship, or the inspector is under-resourced, you may not get that, and that's where you can come to me and let me know that it is or isn't working in terms of the Councillor Advocate Scheme. So I have about 247 councillors that are signed up to it across Devon, Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, and I run 4 seminars a year to help councillors get up to speed with new policy areas that government are bringing out that we could work together on in relation to crime and safety. Good practice that is happening across the 2 counties, because there's been some excellent practice, particularly in community safety partnerships, where we're able to share so that we can start doing the same in some of those other areas. And in relation to local neighbourhood policing teams, again, it would be inconsistent depending on the crime levels and depending on the interest of the councillors. So even those who sign up to the Councillor Advocate Scheme, some of them are not very active in that space. So it's whether you've got a crime and disorder issue in your area that will give you the want and the need to do the community leadership around it. And it's different in different patches about what people are focused on. So I think that gives you the effectiveness is the fact that I will intervene if policing won't speak with local councillors, and I don't think I might have only had to do that once in 10 years. So there is generally a good relationship that happens.
I have a supplementary, Chair. One comment before that as well. On the Councillor Advocate Scheme, I do have a real problem with the name of that programme, because my job as a councillor, I don't see it as to advocate for the police. My job is to hold the police to account. So I do feel like that is poorly named as a programme, I'll be honest. But digging a little deeper, my understanding is that you're the appeals board for ASB case reviews. So I triggered an ASB case review in my ward last year. So I appreciate that you consider individual appeals, but how do you assess the effectiveness of the ASB case review system overall in terms of its timeliness, the implementation of recommendations, victim satisfaction, and whether those reviews lead to reduction in repeated antisocial behaviour? And I'd like to finally say, I might be wanting to talk to you after this, because I might be number 2 for you in terms of a councillor that's struggled to address their issues through that channel, as I had the officer who led my ASB case review panel outright refused to meet with me to talk about the action plan that he agreed as part of that. So I have been personally unimpressed and underwhelmed by the ASB case review mechanism, which I've been trying to use to address problems in my own ward, and that's why I'm interested to understand whether is it an issue only in my area, or is it a problem that's actually like, is it working everywhere else and it's just an issue here, or is this because the ASB case review system is just not working well in Devon and Cornwall?
Thank you, Chair. First thing, just to say about the name of councillor advocates, they're actually advocates of my office to help scrutinise and hold the police to account. So they are advocates of my office, not of the police as such. So I do have a few councillor advocates who like to call themselves police advocates, but that's their personal choice. But it is to be advocates of my office so that they can help be part of that process. Just in terms of ASB case reviews, most people are not aware of them. And I am the appeals body, and it is the most painful process. All I can do is look at process. Did they follow the process to do the ASB case review? Not, has this person got a result? That's not what I'm allowed to look at. I can only look at the process, and it's exactly the same with police complaints. Is this person got a result that was needed or not? No, I only can look at did the police follow the process to do the complaint? You know, this is bureaucracy in local government. You know, this is what public service is all about, putting bureaucracy in the way of actually getting results. And I do get that. So I have frustrations. We have literally, I can count on one hand a year that we get to actually have appeals through my office. So they're not well known. And I do encourage people to do them if they've failed to get anywhere with repeat incidences. I don't think we've got a role, because local authorities are the ones for the first port of call really to do the ASB case review, but the police can chair them and work with multi-agency to get that done. But it's interesting, now you say that, I don't think there is a role for the local councillor, but I don't see why not. But I don't know if it's in the guidance or the legislation, but that's quite a good way of holding to account at a local level. So can I take that away? Because I think that's helpful.
Absolutely, I'd happily have a conversation with you about it, Alison.
Thank you. Councillor Hackett.
Thank you again, Chair. I want to involve two things here, and they're related in some ways. I think many of the members will have seen the report on the local news about Alice Beer in Newton Abbot, who was subject to a horrendous attack, and she went back on the front line again. I think such actions need recognising, and also she needs support, because clearly that is a very brave thing to do. So could the Commissioner outline what support people like that will get to help them and make sure they're safe doing their job? And on the flip side of the coin, I see that you have got on page 67 the number of misconduct hearings you've done, 29 so far this year. I've also seen another 11 that form part of that. And extrapolating the figures for the cost to you, that's roughly about 150,000. You say that some of the pensions may be removed. How many instances have you removed those pensions so that you can put the money back into the pot? Because that's a substantial amount of money going out, 150,000. So would you like to comment on those two things for me, please? Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I have to say, when Alice Beer was brutally, it was attempted murder is what they went to the courts for on it, and they released the body-worn video after conviction. Brilliant officer, in fact so brilliant and brave that she went and spoke about it as well in the media afterwards and what that was like. I was with the force executive at the time we heard about this, and so my immediate questions was, what do we do to support her? What is the plans that are in place? So they reassured me that everyone wrap around, everyone's gone in. There is something called a trim process after a horrific incident that somebody may have had, which a supervisor must ask if they want some support after a particular incident that they've attended. But I have to say it's laudable that Alice was willing to speak publicly about what that was like and that she's back at work. That is laudable, I have to say. One of the things I've subsequently asked is, has there been any policy or practice changes since that incident occurred that you need to think about for police officers? And when we were discussing the health and safety work in the force only a few weeks ago, and this sounds quite silly, but one of the challenges was that she entered a block of flats that had an automated door that closed behind her, and they could not open the door to go in and help her. So they've got little door stops that they take with them on duty now, little mini door stops that they can use if they are rushing into a building to go and do something. It's minor, but that sort of thing would have helped her get support quicker in the incident. So, I do follow up these particular incidents of officers, and I'm really pleased that the force has done well to support her to get her back to work so quickly. So, shows she's very resilient, and it also shows that the force have supported her well. Just in terms of, I'm trying to think what your second point was. Misconduct hearings. Pension revocation is a tool that I am able to use as a commissioner to basically remove the employer's element of a pension that's been paid into a police officer's salary. I have at the moment got 7 in with the Home Secretary. The ask is you've got to make a case. The force have to make a case to me which officers they believe meet the threshold, which has to have been a criminal offence. Largely, that's the main threshold. I then have to write to the Home Secretary. If I support those or not, I make a decision which ones I'm going to put forward to the Home Secretary. They will then say whether or not I can go ahead with the next stage, which is to then liaise with those people who were affected to ask for any mitigation, and then I can make a local decision. So at the moment, I think I've got 6 authorised certificates from the Home Secretary and 1 new one that's gone in. I'm looking to John because it's sort of his job in my team that does it. Yeah, and we've shared all of our policy that we've created around this with all of the regional police and crime commissioners, so that we're all doing it in the same way as well. So we had some really belt and braces policy.
So just for clarification, there have been instances in this force where they have been removed, the employer's element of the pension. Thank you.
Yeah, when I was first elected, I removed a pension from a police officer who had committed a crime. And then these are the most latest ones that I've done.
Commissioner, just to reassure you, when you get asked a question, I'm happy for you just to reply. It's much quicker. I accept the protocol, but we're trying to get through, aren't we? So coming back to me every time is not necessary. It's fine. That may not be the case when the real chair is in the House, of course. But Councillor Chapiewski.
Thank you. Councillor Chapiewski, Mid-Devon. Just very briefly on the Council Advocate Scheme, we have a good relationship with our inspector, and we make appointments and convene as and when required. We may not do regular quarterly sessions, though that may be reviewed in time. So it can work, it does work. We've got good cooperation there. My question relates back to ASB, and we've talked about this previously. The street marshals have been very effective in improving the reporting of ASBs so that the hotspots can be more clearly identified. Where we struggle, and again this was raised at the last meeting and probably the previous one, was the incidence of ASBs goes up, but the incidence of reporting fluctuates. So my question pertains to the reporting of ASBs. And again, in line with what you said earlier about continuity and trends, I personally would find it very helpful to see whether ASBs are going up or down. And if we could go into a little bit more depth and perhaps consider reporting personal nuisance and environmental ASBs separately so that the level of detail is there. One, it gives us a feel as how things are going, where problems are occurring. And I believe and hope that members of the public, if they see those figures, will believe, a lot of them are quite cynical, that we are looking at them and action can be taken. That in itself will, I would like to think, would improve the level of reporting and hence balance the street marshals. So if the street marshals go, but the members of the public and councils are improving their reporting, we will get the information that we need. And so the street marshals would have been the seed. If they can continue, that would be great, but I think we all know that the cost is going to be an issue, and if we can get our reporting better. And one last side point, again, when we spoke about this before, there was a discussion about ASBs, because they're reported to council and police, the numbers don't mean anything. Speaking with the local safeguarding and police representatives, we came to the strong conclusion that the majority of people, when they report an ASB, are primarily going to go to the police. Yes, there are ASBs within the council. I think if you look around the room, if someone had an issue with an ASB, would they call their local council or would they call the police? We all know what the answer to that is. So if we can move on from the police aren't the only owners, they are the main owner and we can control that. I'm working with our local council to improve the reporting so that the reporting that they do is in the same format as the police reporting, so that we can combine if and when required. So my question really is, can we look at the ASB reporting, make it more continuous, and consider, I'm just suggesting that the personal nuisance and environmental categories, you may want to do it differently. That's fine. It's your shout on that one. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a few things there. Let's not be misled that policing is the ASB main responder that you should report to. The oversight of ASB should be the local authority. I think I've mentioned at this panel before, the local government ombudsman did a report called Out of Order in 2023 that said the council's response to oversight of ASB was woeful across the country, that there's inconsistency oversight, and that the councils should have oversight regardless of the agency that is dealing with it. So whether it's a housing association, whether it's the police, whether it's a local business, whatever is happening, it says that the oversight should be local authority. So the police often get called, and it often doesn't meet the threshold of a police ASB. As you know, it's got to be those particular categories. So there are some challenges in that space, which is why community safety partnerships are so key at a local level, to make sure you've got some oversight of the wider picture of what's happening in those local authority areas. In terms of antisocial behaviour, though, we've had a 10.2% reduction in antisocial behaviour incidences reported to Devon and Cornwall Police in the 12 months to July this year. So, you know, I'm very sceptical of figures, whether they go up or down, because it never feels like that in a reality. If you would say, oh, it's 10% reduction, no one would say, in my community, I felt a 10% reduction in antisocial behaviour. So, you know, I'll never be lauding out that we've reduced something and say it's actually the case either, but we have had a reduction in the reporting of antisocial behaviour. And as you know, the way that the police record crime has been scrutinised so heavily over the last few years with His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, that crime integrity and the recording of crime has improved dramatically. So I am more confident that this is a reality than the normal, but I still, it never feels like that in reality. The other thing I will say is the Crime England for this crime survey for England and Wales, over half, 52.1% of respondents in Devon and Cornwall agree that the police and the local council are dealing with ASB and crime issues that matter. Nationally, it's 47.9%. So we are slightly higher than the national average in relation to that. Is that something that's promising? Does it, because we are working so well together? Again, just to give you a bit of a flavour. And in terms of that same survey with the public, 19.1% of people in Devon and Cornwall believe antisocial behaviour is a very or fairly big problem in their area, 19.1%, and in England and Wales it's 25.2%. So again, there is a little bit of sort of promising stats that we might be doing something a little bit better than elsewhere, but it doesn't always feel like that, I think, in reality. So I'm confident in the reporting in relation to ASB. I'm confident that community safety partnerships are sort of all over where they can, which is why we have the Street Marshal scheme and other things that we do in collaboration. And I'm really clear that the local authorities need to make sure they have good oversight. And again, this may be something to think through in the councillor advocate scheme, if it would help councillors have some of that better oversight. But maybe a local scrutiny panel within the council to do that scrutiny would be really helpful. And the environment side, I'm not sure how much we can break it down. And I know you're really interested in this particular subject, but I will go away and ask what we can do.
Thank you, Commissioner. Panel members, I will come back to you, but I'm just going to, before I do, I'm just going to say, after I've come back to you, I've got Councillors Caylor, Gray, Pole, and coming in and out with Councillor Penberthy. I'm not going to take any more on this, simply because we are past 12 o'clock. We've got two more substantive items, and I don't really want to be asking people to be brief, because that isn't my style, but by the same token, we don't want to be here all day. So if you could think about the brevity of your questions when I come to you on this and in the future agenda items, that would be great. Back to you, Councillor Czapierski.
Thank you for that response. And could I consider or suggest that we add something to the work programme about the liaison between the police and the council about the reporting, because I know not many members of our community have read the Out of Order 2023 report, and they will just pick up the phone and call the police. And if that needs to be addressed and filtered, that's a nice piece of work that, working collaboratively with the councils and with the police, we can come up with a solution. My goal is to give residents the confidence that when they pick up the phone, they will be listened to and people will act. What you've said, I totally take on board, but ultimately we're dealing with a very simple first response. How we deal with that is something we should be able to manage. Thank you.
Just if I may, I'm going to be really frank here. One incident of antisocial behaviour ain't necessarily going to get a response from the police, especially on a Friday or a Saturday night where violence will be the things that they're going to attend, and that will be their priority. So it's actually about building the case if it's a persistent problem so that we're able to address it. A one-off antisocial behaviour incident that didn't involve violence is unlikely to get the police attendance. So it is about how do we work together through our community safety partnerships to support people who are getting persistent antisocial behaviour. That's why the street marshals are so important, because they can help gather the evidence to start putting in place some of these things like community protection warnings, community protection notices, and potentially in the future respect orders. So I think for me, I'm not sure there's more I can do on that front. I'm really understanding of how frustrating it can be, and the issue that the police and the council need to do together is make sure they are picking up persistent offenders and dealing with those, but they will not be responding to every antisocial behaviour incident, and particularly not on a Friday and Saturday night when violence is the priority for attendance. And I know this from working with a number of towns.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think expectation management is really important. Okay, let's come back to you, Councillor Benworthy, for another one.
Thank you. Just want to pick up on page either 39 or 99 around theft. It's good to see what's happening with UK Pack and Park, but we know that there seems to be ongoing and substantial increases in retail theft and violence towards shop staff, and that's quite worrying. At the moment, the section on theft hasn't got any sort of figures in it. It's got reporting on initiatives, but given that this is a report on your police and crime plan, are you satisfied that the plan is sufficiently robust, preventative and partnership approach to dealing with retail theft and violence? Because that really is hitting all of our high streets, and that's not just an impact on local businesses, it's also an impact on their staff and the staff willingness to work. So it's just because obviously since your crime plan has been published, we're seeing a trend, and it's about how your plan reflects the changes.
Thank you. I appreciate the support for the effort that's trying to be made in this space from yourself and actually from Park. I've been working alongside Park to help expand to the outer edges of Plymouth, not just the city centre, some of the services that they are able to offer and support. But I think there is, I'm trying to think of the financial year that this report relates to, because we do have actually conviction rates, number of years put in prison, successes that we've actually got on the back of the UK PAC system that we've implemented. So I will go back and check. It's worth putting in there because I know we've got them because they keep telling me them. So I want to thank businesses though. Can I just say how fantastic response that they've given to the new business crime reporting tool, because they don't just have to report theft, they can report antisocial behaviour that's happening outside their shop, they can report anything that they see that's going on in their communities through that portal, and it brings the package into such a good standard because they can upload their own CCTV, they can upload their statements, that it actually creates a package for the police to act quickly. And we are while we are woeful at domestic abuse results, we are excellent at actually retail theft in particular, and burglary. We are one of the top performing in the country. So we have got two extremes going on, but it's very simple when you've got the evidence and it's really clear and you can prosecute. So I'm really proud of that work, and thank you for raising it. But I'll see if I can get those conviction data and things in there.
Okay, Councillor Cader.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. Mine's on the knife crime, serious violence funding. The force is receiving funding from the Serious Violence Duty and the Knife Crime Concentration Fund. The question is, how much of that 487,000 knife crime allocation is spent in Cornwall? What measures or what measurable results have been achieved from that?
Thank you for your question. I have every sympathy with Cornwall, but it's also reassuring you don't meet the threshold levels for the level of knife crime in Cornwall to be involved in that fund. We were surprised we received it as Devon and Cornwall because we don't have a high scale of knife crime, but we were on the bottom threshold. We just crept in. Now, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, but we were happy that we crept in to get the funding, but Cornwall didn't have the scale of it to meet the funding criteria. It's government funding criteria, not something I can say I can override. So either be reassured that you don't have high levels of knife crime in Cornwall, but I understand you'll feel like you're not being invested in that particular specific crime type.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Gray.
Thank you, Chair. To move things on swiftly, some of my questions have already been answered, so I'll contact you direct for the balance of the answers. Thank you.
Well, if you have anything on the next agenda item, Councillor Gray, I'll make sure I come to you first. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, so just back to UK PAC. So what we're told, so unfortunately our Morrison's is closing because of, reportedly because of the high level of shoplifting is involved in that. And I'm just concerned because we have anecdotal information from shop staff that they find it cumbersome to sort of upload that information to systems. So I just wondered whether any kind of assessment can be made on sort of underreporting from organisations sort of that are involved in the business crime reduction partnerships and systems and UK PAC systems, and then also just to sort of ask for more information there about sort of interventions in terms of sort of incidences, because we've got a lot of stuff about outcomes in terms of years of weeks and stuff of sentences and behaviour orders, but not so much in terms of actual sort of people perhaps that have been dissuaded from these shoplifting activities.
I think one of the challenges is what we're about to enter into. So we've had an underreporting, and I think, you know, I'm going to be really frank with you. During austerity, I think the police did a fantastic job of not accepting any reports of shop theft. I mean, they basically said businesses deal with it yourself. Then we had an uplift in police officers, and now we've had a real focus because we put it in the plan on retail crime. And what we've started to see, and the system is actually paramount, and in Exeter, they use SentrySys, which is a back-end part of UK PAC. UK PAC actually does a whole package around it, but they use the actual same system in the background. So we're all connected, all have a business crime reduction partnership. I think our challenges are going to be, as we move forward, is there's the changes to the sentencing guidelines. People who are persistent shoplifters, or shop thefters, I think people want to start saying instead of shoplifters because it sounds a bit more fierce, is that they're removing 12-month sentencing or less, and most shoplifters would have had so many weeks or so many months put in prison for respite for a community and been released. We're going to lose those 12-month sentences. So there's a bit of a challenge as we move forward is what does a good out-of-court resolution look like if there's something that we can do with them in the community? How do we stop persistent people who are committing crime reach a threshold of more than a 12-month sentence in order to bother even taking them through the court. So we're going to have to use all these other tools, these respect orders, the criminal behaviour orders. We're going to have to use all this bureaucracy because it's going to be much harder, I think, to make a difference in the court. And I know how challenging it's been, in particular, for some officers to do the level of paperwork required for a criminal behaviour order and evidence gathering that's needed. It just takes so long. So I will say that there's been some fantastic partnership working in your area and has been for a continued and prolonged period of time. And the fact that you've still got businesses who are struggling because of the state of what's happening on the streets is really, really sad and disappointing. It might be worth us talking outside of this to actually try and come to the bottom of what's going on there.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sure you'll take that offer up. Let's finish with Councillor Pemberley.
Thank you. This is sort of an overarching one rather than a particular page. There's an enormous amount of work going on in here. Lots of it is targeted on different places around different themes, and that's understandable. But I just wondered what you do and how you can be transparent in this, in seeking assurance that both from policing and your budgets, the share of that funding is being spread across each of the BCUs, in looking at risk, demand and need, because I think some of the questions today have been around, well, this is happening here and not there, because it isn't fairly transparent where that's happening, and within that, ensuring parity of approach to funding CSPs and DHRs, because that doesn't seem to be happening across the BCUs, and that would help all of the CSPs to work in consistent ways. So really it was about lots of great work, but how can we be sure at BCU level, because obviously there might be some changes with LGR, but they sort of sit the major centres, being able then to see that both the police and yourselves are allocating resources based on risk, demand and need.
I think it's quite important to say that it's not, or should I say it is, but not always from a statistical perspective. So as an example, Knife Crime Concentration Fund, Torbay, Exeter, Plymouth are going to get it, so Cornwall miss out. Okay, so they don't get that. What other investments are going on in Cornwall to give them confidence that we're working alongside them to keep their communities safe? So sometimes it's based on somebody requesting that they'd like some help, willing to do it, ability to do it, and we can do something very small and make a difference. So sometimes it's based on the willingness of a local geography or an area versus how the money is displayed to do with statistics. Because if it was to do with statistics, Torbay, Plymouth and Exeter would be the only people who got money. That would be the reality. And while I know the leader of your council would be very keen to have a third of all of the budget for the whole of Devon and Cornwall Police in Plymouth, it is a universal service, and so it is a challenge for us. I do try my best to, if councillors and if local authorities need help from my office or the police, I do my best to try and fulfil that for them. So the reassurance I can give you is that I have a monitoring officer who makes sure that I'm not allowed to just do pet projects or something a bit maverick without thinking it through, that I've gone through a governance procedure. I've got a treasurer who can make sure that I'm spending the money in the right way. But as you will know, sometimes it's because somebody's willing and it's an opportunity, and other times it's just because that's what the data says it needs. So I think it's about getting the balance right, and I understand your concern, but my worry would be Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly would probably not get anywhere near.
I wasn't necessarily thinking about the totality of the budget. I was thinking you've got lots of themes in here, and in those themes it's not quite clear why allocations are happening. So actually, just to give some sense on a more specific area, actually the resources are divided because I wouldn't expect Plymouth to be getting any funding for rural crime, because that would be bizarre. We've got Poole Farm, but it's hardly rural. So I think there are swings and roundabouts on that, but actually looking at your spend and also the support for CSPs on the rationale behind that in themes might be quite helpful for people when it comes to then saying, well, why is it here and not there? Because it's not very clear in your report. It's a sort of more generic thing, and we'll all then get, well, why are they getting it, not us getting it? And if you're able to at least give some sort of flavour, that might be useful.
I'll see if I can put the narrative within this annual report as well,
I'm going to thank you, Councillor Pemberley. I'm going to move us on with We're asked to note the report panel. I'd like you to note, if that's okay, and then we're going to move on. If you've got questions that you haven't asked and you can shoehorn them into the next agenda item, then get shoehorning. Okay, right. Item 9 is the delivery of the police and crime plan ASB priority. So, Commissioner, over to you.
Chair, you think we'd just done that agenda item, the level of ASB conversations that we've had. So I will take the report as read at this point because I am really keen, because we've got operational officers in the room who have been waiting to share with you what it is that they do on a day-to-day basis. So first thing I will say, as you know, antisocial behaviour affects all of us in all communities in different ways and in different styles. And it's different people, different ages. It's not always one consistent and easy thing to address. It could be noisy bikes, noisy vehicles, to young people causing damage to property, to street drinkers being drunk and intimidating on the street. It can be all sorts of things that encompass antisocial behaviour. Now, I know I've mentioned that this force has been exemplary in the way it's delivered the Community Safety Accreditation Scheme powers to as many people as the Chief Constable can delegate them to help policing keep us safe across our 2 counties. And this is another innovation from Devon and Cornwall. Largely started in Cornwall, so Cornwall Fire, who is part of the local authority, policing, and also the ambulance service, coming together to say, if you were to look at integrated services for the emergency services, what would that look like? And this is the model that we've come up with. So it's those 3 emergency services in one, and they will be able to tell you what that involves. We've got Megan Buckley here, who is the Tor Point Tri-Service Safety Officer, and Josh Harmon, who is from Lostwithiel, who is the Tri-Service Safety Officer. And we've got one seconded into Devon as well, which is why we've got Devon Somerset Fire and Rescue represented here today. But I will hand the floor over to them. They're much more interesting and exciting than anything we've done so far in this meeting. No offence, but these, when I go to a passing out parade or I meet the new individuals that are recruited into Tri-Service Safety Officers, never have I been more humbled for the level of professionalism and expertise and high quality training that these officers get. And I wish we could do this for police officers. The level of training and in-depth support that they get, it is outstanding. So I will hand over to Megan and Josh.
Hi, good afternoon, councillors. Thank you, Commissioner. I've been given the privilege today to try and give you a very quick oversight as to what my role and Megan's role involves. And the Commissioner's led me into it very nicely. We initially started in 2014, and it was born out of an idea to find a way in which emergency services can work together to be more efficient, to share information and to understand risk. Since that time, we've progressed, and we're now up to 15 whole-time officers, including our first officer in Devon, who has started down in Holsworthy. And we've had multiple external reviews that have proven the success and has warranted us to continue to grow, and we still have aspirations to grow even further. Initially, the concept was that we would be placed in more rural areas, and that would be due to the lack of the emergency services footprint that were within those areas. In terms of our operational response, we do respond for all 3 services, police, fire and ambulance. To try and summarise it very briefly, in terms of policing, we work alongside the neighbourhood team. We're not sworn officers, we don't arrest, but we work with the PCSOs and the MBMs and become well embedded within our areas. In terms of the fire service, we are fully fledged firefighters that undergo the same training and respond to all the same incidents that every other whole-time firefighter or on-call firefighter would. And for the ambulance service, we respond primarily to Category 1 and Category 2 calls. So those are the highest life-threatening emergency risks. We don't transmit and take the people that we help, but we will provide that initial emergency care until ambulance crews can come and take over from us. Although we was initially based in the more urban areas, we've also proven that it works in the we're initially more rural. We've also proven our worth in urban areas, including Penzance and Camborne over the last few years. One of the key benefits for us is we are designated areas and we work primarily out of those areas.
So as a benefit of that is we become well known within those areas and we become the point of contact for the people that we represent and serve. We also have the privilege of building up very good collaboration, working relationships with various people, whether that's GPs, social prescribers, our local response teams, as well as schools, safeguarding teams, housing providers. It's unlimited, the different people and the different connections that we manage to build up. We talk about, or I've talked about, emergency response. That only actually takes up about 5% of our time. Our primary function is to work with early intervention and prevention. We're very privileged in that the people that we go and respond to, we can then deal with any other incidents and continue to work with that person or their family until we see a positive conclusion. So the benefits of that is, whereas in the past you would have one service, be it the police or the fire, would attend and deal with somebody, they may look at the risks associated with their service. We have been trained across the 3 services, and therefore every visit that we carry out, we look at risks from all 3 perspectives, whether that's fire risks, whether that's police risks, or whether that's health risks. If we go in one capacity and notice risks across of any of the other services, we will share that information. So to try and give that a practical example, if we was to attend an elderly person that's taken a fall as a category 1 or category 2 emergency medical call, whilst we're there, if we spot fire concerns, we will deal with the detection there and then. We can also pass on and share that risk with the fire services. If we spotted police concerns, we would report back to our neighbourhood teams and we would put in those initial safeguarding referrals, whether that's through a public protection notice through the police or whether that's through adult social care or our other avenues. By doing this, what we're doing is reducing time and handovers, and with any sort of information handover, there's a risk that things get lost. The key benefit here is that the person receiving this care is receiving it in a more timely manner, and there is no loss of information. They're getting the better end result as a result of us coming to see them. I appreciate I've been asked to talk, and today is a bit about antisocial behaviour. The way that that falls within our remit is that we do work alongside our local policing teams. Some of the things that we do is we will do targeted hotspotting patrols. We are in marked vehicles and we're a high visibility presence within those areas, so we can act as a deterrent. We also, through our relationships with local schools, try and encourage diversionary work with especially the younger people that are starting to go down the route of antisocial behavioural problems. If needed, we can also help and assist police officers with taking people along the ASB journey, whether that involves level 1 and level 2s. We will work with them with that process, obviously primarily hoping to divert them away from that. And we also do, within schools, we do specialist work. If we notify problems or spot problems, for example, fire setting behaviour, we can work with that family or with that school and try and provide some further education so that we're dealing with not just the root cause, but the wider community area as well. So yes, what we do is we support and we help. We're not here to replace, we don't replace any existing resources. It's something which has proven to work, and it's something where we invest that time, not only with the person who is initially source of the ASB, but also their family and the environment in which they're in. One very last quick example, just to try and put some real life scenario to it, is one officer was using their local contacts. They was approached to deal with what was a bullying issue essentially in school. Whilst working with the school and delving into the family life of the person who was believed to be behind the bullying, a much bigger picture of why that person maybe was reacting or reaching out in that way was the circumstances they were working with. As a result of that, they've worked with the school, with the family. There's a social worker involved. There's a safeguarding surrounding this young lady and helping her going forward. So it's a view that we try and approach from all angles, and regardless of how we cross that threshold, we give everybody that same 360 level of care. Thank you.
I think what I'll also introduce, just because as you've got other people here, I'll let them all introduce themselves, but I'm sure Andy Barrett's probably got a few things that he might want to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm Andy Barrett. I'm the Tri-Service Development Lead, and thank you for Josh for giving you a bit of an insight to what a Tri-Service Safety Officer is. And it is a very unique collaboration this collaboration in Cornwall, which is spreading into Devon, is nationally leading piece of work. And to build on what Josh has provided you with, it's a collaboration between fire, police and health. And whilst Josh has indicated the ambulance side of this, what's very unique is we're working with the Integrated Care Board and the community mental health teams. And that's a really important development for us as a team and for our communities, because what that effectively does for us, it gives us a pathway into the homes of those that are most vulnerable in our communities. And this collaboration provides, whatever service it provides from, gives us an into the homes of those that are most vulnerable. And what's very unique, and you've talked about safeguarding here today, Tri-Service has become quite developed in its safeguarding protocols and is very important. And it doesn't just finish there for a Tri-Service safety officer. They work with other services, other agencies and the volunteer sector to reduce and mitigate, put some mitigation into place to support the individuals in that home. So Tri-Service is spreading into Devon. We're working with Devon and Somerset Fire and the Health Authority here in Devon as well. In terms of money, if you want to get down to sort of facts and figures, because it's a collaboration, each of those three services are contributing a third in funds to that role. So when you talk about efficiency and effectiveness, you've got services really sharing what funding they have to fund this particular role. And what's really unique about it is the information sharing that a Tri-Service safety officer has. So a Tri-Service safety officer has access to the police computer system. They have access to the mental health computer system, Cornwall councils and the fire service. And what that does, it provides the Tri-Service safety officer in a very unique position where they can have a holistic view of the issues relating to that individual, that family or community issues. And Tri-Service are problem solvers and they are dealing with some very complex community issues. So I don't know if there's any questions.
Thanks, Andy. If it's okay, Chair, I might just get everyone to introduce themselves just so you know who it is that's here and if you wanted to say anything about the scheme. So,
Thanks very much. Pete Murley's from Devon Somerset Fire and Rescue. I'm the lead for the collaboration work that we do. So the TSSO falls under me. Just for context, Cornwall Fire and Rescue have kindly lent us one of their TSSOs. We've had them on secondment for over a year now, and it's worked so well that we're not going to give them back, and we're going to second that person and permanently adopt them as an employee. And over the next year, 18 months, working hard with Andy to try and expand the roles further. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Sherris. I'm the Collaboration, Resilience and Partnership Group Manager for Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service. Relatively new in post, but I've had the privilege in my previous role as the training manager for Cornwall Fire and Rescue. So I've trained all the TSSOs in their fire capacity, but it's been great to be involved in the wider portfolio now. So thank you.
And good afternoon. I'm Rich Preston, Police Inspector for Devon and Cornwall Police. I'm the Collaboration and Tri-Service Lead for the force. And I think as Andy and Josh have outlined, I think it's fairly obvious the economies of scale that can be achieved through the team and the work they cover across the three main areas is clear to see. I think certainly from a personal perspective, I was a North Devon Sector Inspector up in Ilfracombe for many years, where there's lots of deprivation and social issues that need support. And certainly as we look to sort of roll out TSSOs and consider the options for us in terms of increasing that capacity across Devon, I can see the intrinsic benefits of what that will provide for those communities based on what we've previously seen in Cornwall. So if there are any other further questions, we're happy to answer those.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm the Operational Tri-Service Officer based in Cornwall in the Tor Point area. Again, just the collaboration work. So I'm one of the new recruits. I've been in the post for 2 years. And Josh is my team leader. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. I think there's a few things just to say from a strategic perspective. So this started out when I created a blue light fund with the force. So while this started before I took office in 2016, and Andy Hitchin was the first ever Tri-Service safety officer down in Cornwall, we wanted to work out how could we expand it. So I created a blue light fund, which was with police and fire, and we all started putting together a lot more of the funding to expand the scheme beyond just one officer. The level of evaluation valuation that it's got to at the moment is that it's been on the What Works website for the College of Policing. It's recognised as a service entity. Bless you. And they are also at the point now where I don't think they realise. They'll say to you, "Oh yeah, I did CPR 3 times yesterday." You know, they save people's lives while they're out and about, and it's really easily forgotten because it's just something that they do as part of the day job. Some really other good examples that they've had is things like, and you will know this, councillors, people who are really vulnerable in our community, who may be hoarders, people who are sort of neglecting themselves. These are the sorts of individuals that they're able to identify and work with, which are the same individuals that the police would be interested in making sure they're safeguarded, not cuckooed from drug dealers, not being exploited by people. It's the same that fire would want to make sure that they don't have a fire in their home because they're at higher risk with the level of stuff that they've got in their property. And they're of interest to the ambulance service because they're often unhealthy and unwell and not looking after themselves. So there's some real opportunity with this, having all 3. I remember when they first started, they had it was almost at the point of 3 laptops. You know, this is the back service is not integrated, all of the systems. So that's the bit that's tricky. We are waiting for the national replacement for Airwave that we've been waiting for since the 10 years I've been here, national IT project, that's the infrastructure for the radio service for policing, fire and ambulance. It hasn't been implemented fully yet. We haven't got it. Once we've got that, that will be a bit of a game changer because they'll all be on exactly the same. But we wanted to share it with you because we think this should be a national future vision for the emergency services. And I think with all of the changes with governance around, governance has been the challenge. The reason it's been successful in Cornwall, and you know what it's like, it's to do with pensions, it's to do with terms and conditions, it's all very tricky when you start bringing different elements into it. Governance has been the challenge, but we've managed to achieve it in Cornwall, which is why it's a secondment to Devon. Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue is a different governance model to Cornwall. So I think there's opportunities in the future with all the changes that are going on with boundary changes and efficiencies being made, that it's just something for you to be really aware of. And we'd love you to demand one, that you'd like one in your communities to support you so that it pushes pressure on us to try our best to find the funding for it.
Can't believe you're asking for parochial requests now. No, it's the contradiction, it's fine. I'm going to go, first of all, to Councillor Gray to check if you've got a question, because I said I would.
Not so much a question, but thank you for your presentation. And my observation is that you could probably add one more skill to that list of police, fire and paramedic from the example that you gave of counsellor, because that is what I'm sure everybody would agree, we have similar things we come across that you came across when you were dealing with somebody who was being bullied. Congratulations on your training and getting to where you are now. I understand from this system that to be part of this, you have to have at least one skill in one of the services, whether it be a part-time fireman or a special constable or a paramedic, if I'm correct. No, that's what I was given when I visited the police station. So you could have a complete novice coming into this. That's fantastic. Yeah, okay. Congratulations, that's all I can say, and I think it's a fantastic system. Thank you.
Just to say, when we first started the scheme, you had to be a trained firefighter, and it was because they were remodelling the fire service, and it was just easier to do it. And I remember, do you want to say? And I remember that the change came in after that, so it was easy to do. Let's already have a trained firefighter and add the other ones on. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, you don't have to have had any of them, do you?
So originally we started that small scale. You needed a bit of skill behind the person to do that, and over the years we've developed courses across the services to enable us, when we recruit, to provide people, really take somebody off the street with the right qualities that we need and put them through the appropriate training course now. So we haven't got that. It's open to anybody when we recruit, which is a real positive thing for us.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for turning up late. There was an accident at Tideford, and the traffic after that was just horrific. Yes, so the tri-service, it's absolutely fantastic. We've got such amazing personnel and they have been so welcomed and loved by the communities that they serve. I don't think there's any chance that we in Cornwall could ever look to reducing them, although there are issues, particularly from the NHS, with the Ambulance Trust looking to possibly withdraw some funding from the scheme. So thank you very much to yourselves and everybody else who's involved. But I'd like to just go back one step and the reason why we had to go down that route. So that was the three major organisations, the senior organisations, fire, police and ambulance, were either reducing or totally absent from those rural communities in Cornwall. And all three of them just weren't serving the public in West Cornwall. So going back to what the Commissioner offered, now I've met with Chief Superintendent Scott Bradley. He very kindly came to St Ives, spoke with us, listened to our concerns, and I think he's trying to do all he can. And we've had certainly more patrols around the town that I've seen. Hell, I think there was 2 police officers with guns the other week, which maybe wasn't quite as welcome as we would have hoped. But if we take St Ives, you know, the Commissioner very kindly said, if you do need help, so I request that, because that we do feel, certainly in West Cornwall, if not the rest of Cornwall, that we are a very poor relation when it comes to actually any organisation where Devon and Cornwall join up. We normally are the ones who get stuffed. So, and I do believe that that happened with the police. St Ives pays a precept to the Police and Crime Commissioner of £2 million. I believe that's matched by the government. So there's £4 million coming just from St Ives for one police officer who does 32 hours, another who's on long-term sick, and a PSPO. So everybody questions, how is that able to happen for £4 million? Obviously, you're going to get winners and losers. We're not going to get exactly £4 million worth of policing. We totally and utterly understand that. If there is a big issue where a better response is required, it comes from Penzance. With the greatest respect at the moment, with all the sickness and absence leave at the moment at Penzance Police Station, it's basically a basket case. It probably is finding it difficult just to police Penzance, never mind send response and help to Hale and St Ives and the wider West Cornwall Peninsula. So, yes, the Tri service is brilliant, but it was originally there to fill gaps, and in some areas, and we certainly feel in policing, that gap still exists and could well be worse. So I would very much like to take you up on your offer and have a discussion. As I say, I've had that with Scott Bradley. He certainly reassured me, trying to do all he can, but he can only work with the resources which he has, and I would like you to give him some more resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I think that point's been made loud and clear, and thanks to the team as well. I mean, I think on the specific issue of funding, it's probably worth pointing out that we all pay X amounts, but of course we're not stationary. We move around, and when we move around, we benefit from the work of the police wherever we go. I mean, I know people leave St Ives. I've never met anyone who had 7 wives, but I know people certainly leave, and so they that's no doubt why you're here. Anyway, but I think the point is that we benefit from the police wherever we are, not just in our own patches. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to all of you who've come along to talk to us today. I have to admit, I didn't know about you guys, and I'm really happy to hear what you're doing. I also sit on the Devon and Somerset Fire Authority on the Community Safety Committee, and actually we've had a renewed focus across the service on particularly home fire safety visits, And it looks as though I'm trying to be more targeted, probably to the kind of people that you will come across who have multiple issues going on and contact with a variety of public sector organisations. And I suppose I'm really happy that we've got police and a fire service here as well. Hello over there. I guess what I'd really like to ask you is how quickly can we get you working across Devon? And if you wanted to focus to start working on, Ilfracombe would be a really big one for me, where we are quite physically remote from elsewhere, where the fire service struggles to keep, the retained staff at the fire service, fire, what on earth is it called where fire engines live? Fire stations, thank you. Honestly, it's just so exciting. So I would like to put a plea in for, can we get moving in this sort of stuff in Ilfracombe? We'd be really happy to talk with you further about that. Thank you.
I look to Andy to see, is it a doable option? Can you recruit one at a time?
I think with the success we've had in Devon, and we're working with Peter Devon, the fire service, a bit closer, sorry about that. It's normally not a problem. But what's important for us is within Devon, we've successfully piloted in Devon. We'll be looking to expand in Devon. And we're looking, what's particularly unique is because you've got 4 partners looking at, we have to take into account where the demand is for those services across these partners. And northeast, sort of northwest Devon is quite an important area. We spoke it through Richard's sort of experiences as well. So we're looking to expand in the very near future. What we have to do through the OPCC is sit down with the strategic leaders and go, right, it's successful in Devon. From a collaborative perspective, how much money have we got? And then where are we going to locate them? And it takes us probably 6 months to do recruitment and get the training. It's probably about 9 months before we start the process to get them on independent patrol in those areas. And what's really important, and St Ives has benefited from it, because we've got a tri-service safety officer in St Ives, and which is really important, which supports the policing team. And this is about delivering our services differently, not just efficiently and effectively, differently, so they're problem solving some of the issues, and reducing demand. So going on to the police systems, looking at antisocial behaviour, looking at neighbourhood inquiries. TSSOs can do that, and what that does, it releases police officers and other police staff to go off and do other important things to try to meet that demand, which is really important. So we, as a group here, we're the sort of tactical level that sits above the uniform team that we've got, who are brilliant. But what's really important for us is about us expanding that across Devon so we can have more impact on those communities that need that support. And it shouldn't be lost that tri-service is also about community resilience. It's not a word you've probably heard us use at the moment. But yes, as Josh says, we've predominantly in Cornwall started out in the community, some rural areas where we haven't got such a footprint as emergency services, but we're now in the urbans. We've trialled that, and we know that that model works in the larger towns and cities as well, which is important for us.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Hodgetts, then Councillor Chabiowski, then Councillor Hackett in that order, and then Councillor Pemberley.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Mitchell's point about St Ives, because it's an interesting one. I've done a little bit of looking at figures and things. So the resident population in St Ives is 12,000, but day tripper numbers for a year is 540,000. So you've got over 500,000 day trippers coming into St Ives. And then staying visitors is another 220,000. So you've got this very fluid sort of population. And there's now a new Premier Inn as well, well, bit under construction. That could attract another 64,000 visitors. And I may be wrong on the figures on this, but currently there's one full part-time officer that does 2 days a week in St Ives, and one PCSO who works Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And it seems like there's a there's a big gap there somewhere. And so if there's a possibility to extend the tri-service and have that focus on St Ives, that would be absolutely brilliant. I think it's desperately needed. There are loads of issues with St Ives because of the numbers of people that come in, and it's that recognition of Devon and Cornwall being a holiday destination and the massive increase in numbers, that's where the funding needs to be targeted. There is also the sale of the police station at St Ives, and whether some of the money that was generated from that, whether that can be put into looking at police services in St Ives.
Yeah, I mean, I think Councillor Mitchell and Hodgetts make some good arguments about what I'm feeling is a dissatisfaction with the level of policing resources in the St Ives area, and I know I've had correspondence from you about it as well. I think I'm disappointed in the new building that the police are in, because it is a building that doesn't belong to us, has restricted access, and actually stops other officers who might be in other parts of the towns to visit, because it's difficult to get in. So I feel like I have, that's probably one of the re-provisions that we did after selling the police station that I am not particularly satisfied with. Let me take some of this away in terms of, I mean, the fact that you've got a tri-service is fantastic, but what you're saying to me is the current policing levels, even what you've already got, is actually not at full strength, and you're concerned about the summer. There may be a conversation about street marshals and what the local council's able to supply, and I did, like it or not, pay for CCTV when I first took office for St Ives, and it was a big argument about whether you even wanted CCTV in that town. So, we've been on a journey, I think, in St Ives around wanting the involvement of more police activity and surveillance. But I'm happy to have a conversation. I think you probably want me to come and visit, I suspect. And shall we just maybe not do it in the peak of summer, I think but I know you'd want me to see it in that situation. But actually, I will see if I can come and see you on the shoulder of the summer to see it in action fully. Thank you.
And Commissioner, this is why I looked so surprised when you made that offer at the start. I think my advice to you is, if you want members of this committee to let you know that they have local need, can I suggest you do it by email in future? Because otherwise we won't get home. I'm sure people will reply. It's one of those emails you can guarantee you will elicit a response if your question is who wants more police in their community. Okay. Right, let's go on to Councillor Chapias. Oh, you may, if you're very quick, yes.
I will be very quick. One of my concerns about this is that what is happening, and it's gone out on social networking, Facebook, is that there are some residents that are taking things into their own hands. So this does present a serious issue. And in fact, there's one post about a very recent issue where a woman was being attacked, and a relative has put up £1,000 if somebody can give me a name. No police involvement. So it needs that real focus, I think.
Well, I think the Commissioner's made the offer to come and visit, so I think that's been taken seriously, Councillor.
Absolutely welcome, yeah.
Councillor Chapiaski.
Thank you, Councillor Chapiaski, Mid-Devon. A few questions on the tri-service. The first one is, in Holsworthy you have one individual. Presumably they take holiday, take time off. How do you look at covering, what sort of period of cover would the expectation be? Looking forward to the expansion into Devon, can you give an indication of what you currently feel is required? And you're going to love this last one. Does yesterday's announcement about the government organisation moving from Cornwall, which has one unitary, to Devon, which will have 4 unitaries, is that, I know you probably can't answer this directly, but do you anticipate that being a problem that needs to be raised now, or and then that probably leads on to the unknown. I can see the Police and Crime Commissioner writing the unknown about the Police and Crime Commissioner role and ICBs. But just a very brief summary of, is that something we as councillors need to be pushing for within our districts, or do you manage it with what you're presented with, and we can just look at you as a service that we can expect to see, and we're all looking forward to seeing it? Thank you.
I'll just pick up the reform agenda and then I'll let the operational questions be answered. So at the moment in Devon, because the fire authority is completely separate from the local authority in terms of it's not hosted by the local authorities, the local government reform won't have any changes to that. The issue will be what the fire reform looks like, because that seems to be going quietly somewhere under the radar and in the background, but it's definitely going on. So I think it's more about all of the reform from police, fire, and local authority, but it's less of an issue right now in Devon because it's not local authority led as a fire service, but it will be as we move forward. So we've got a bit of a challenge around governance on our hands. Operational response, who's doing that one?
I'll do that for you if you like. With relation to the one in Devon, and you asked about cover, when you're a small developing sort of project, if I put it that way, it's difficult to, in the shortfall, to cover those gaps such as leave or sickness and things like that. In Cornwall, where we've got 15 tri-service officers, we're now building that resilience in. So if you're talking about ambition, in Cornwall we want 31 tri-service safety officers, just as an example. And that's based on there's 31 fire stations. I'm fire service background. Richard may have something slightly different. But we're looking at 31. And that's not to say that could be 62, because what you've effectively got is their shift pattern is 3 days on, 3 days off. So they're long days. So you've got that gap of 3 days. But this is a role that's delivering the service differently and complementing the resources that you've got in those rural areas. So looking at Devon, I spoke to Peter in front of me. There's 84 fire stations in Devon, and that potentially we have discussions about that. But that could be our aspirations for Devon, and you've got to double that up subject to their numbers as ready. So there's a bit of a challenge around covering them whilst they're not there, because people do become reliant on them. But that's for us as a management team to put that support in. And what was the second question, Sir Councillor? I think a minimum of 84 is what we're going for. I'm signing Peter up to that one for Devon, but we would like one at every fire station, because you've generally got a fire station in every community, and that's how we sort of base it on. Some of the challenges could be that with health, so the Integrated Care Board, they may want them aligned to doctor's surgeries. So these are some of the wider things that we're evolving all the time, and that health, very similar to St Ives, whilst you haven't got a police station there, and they are in the Stenic, which is a doctor's surgery. One of the big advantages for Tri-Service is we sit down with the GPs and the doctors, and we are sharing information, going, the doctor's saying to us, we're a bit worried about one of our patients, we haven't seen them for a while, and we're going there and visiting them and making sure they're okay, and can feed back to the doctors. So actually working at the doctor's surgeries has a big advantage for us, particularly in the health arena, which is a real positive for us.
Right, thank you. I've got 3 more questions on this agenda item from Councillors Hackett, Penberthy and Caroline Jones. And Councillor Hackett, just to help you out, before you ask your question, you've got half an hour left on your car parking, so bear that in mind.
You've got even less, Chair. I'll help you out as well. Right, we've got one in my patch in Holsworthy, very highly regarded, couldn't speak more highly about them. 2 questions. Firstly, could they receive more enhanced training so they have powers of arrest? And secondly, and importantly, is it true they have to work within a certain circumference of the fire station because of fire response times? Thank you.
So in relation to that, they're non-enforcement, non-confrontational, and so they're not warranted orders, and our proposal was not to go down that route, because there's a lot more training that also is about having the confidence of the community with you. And when you're doing prevention, early intervention, having that more neutral stance proves a lot better for us. And it goes outside the role, because if you have enforcement powers, then you're into arrest and more complex witness statements and everything else. This is about early intervention and prevention, and getting inside the homes of those that most need it, and looking at it through the 3 lenses, which is really important. What we do is we're able to provide intelligence to the police from those visits necessary. So there's things we can recognise around that. And the second question, Councillor?
do they have to work within a limited circumference of their fire station for response times?
Tri-service safety officers have got firefighting competencies. So obviously most of you will be familiar that we try to keep them in within a 5-minute surround of the fire station. But, and this is where it's different, because we have IT systems that can tell us how many on-call firefighters are on duty at that time, we are able to go further afield in the Holsworthy area, as you're discussing, to actually get out into the rural communities where there's a bit of isolation, because the problems aren't always necessarily in the towns, in the big cities. It's sometimes spread geographically. So we provide a bit of flexibility, which is really important, to be able to get out into the communities further afield to address some of those vulnerabilities and risks that we have out in the rural areas.
Thank you very much. Councillor Penberthy.
Mine was a specific on the report, so if Caroline's is on this theme, it might be better to switch us.
Okay, we'll finish with you then. Caroline.
Okay, thank you. I live in Hale, so I can absolutely 100% advocate for this kind of service. I think it's wonderful, and I come from an ICB, even though I'm here representing...
Caroline, can you talk into the microphone?
Sorry, yeah, even though I represent lay people in Cornwall, I work at the ICB, so I kind of understand some of the situations we've got going there. Now, this might be the completely wrong place to mention this, but what about the Isles of Scilly? You know, certainly... we have, you know, the Devon Cornwall Police Force that serve there, the Health Cornwall, you know, Cornwall Foundation Trust, the ICB. I know it's a different local authority, but I just don't hear about them at all, and I just wonder what's the support for the people in the Isles of Scilly.
So in terms of the Isles of Scilly, that has been a topic of discussion, and there's been and I think we're still waiting we've offered the opportunity to go there and provide the information around the role, obviously because of the nature of it, but we're nowhere forward with that, and whether the island wants, or the islands want to progress it any further. It's gone quiet at the moment.
I think that's probably because a lot of people aren't there anymore. But I'll certainly, I'll raise it at one of the meetings I attend, see if we can get that conversation starting again, because I just think it's a shame for the residents of the Isles of Scilly. And don't forget, we also have an awful lot of visitors there as well. So they have those summer pressures. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Penberthy.
Thanks. And this is a question I was asked about this report to ask. So on page 132, which is page 8, depending what you mentioned, the Plymouth Safe Bus, and we're really grateful for your contribution. There was a recent meeting where that contribution wasn't known about. So it was, oh, we're going to be closing the Safe Bus down soon. A plea, really, that if you're making contributions, I'm sure not only to the Plymouth Safe Bus, but to others, if it's likely to be annual, can you let people know? The OPCC continues to make £10,000 annual contributions, and so your report saying annual, they thought it was one-off. There's a difference, and it helps planning and trying to secure other partner funding. So they would just say, oh, it says annual there. The Police and Crime Commissioner hasn't said annual before, so we just need to be sure where we stand, because that makes a difference to future planning.
Councillor Penberthy, my chief exec's just saying to me that actually we extended some of these things where, because we are, you know, coming to some of these things would have been extended. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for sitting through what was probably a very long, hot and perplexing at times session, but we're really grateful because I think you heard the view from the room that we think you're all doing a fabulous job, so thank you very much. We need, please, panel, to note the report. I'm assuming we've dealt with everything through this and the previous one, and we're happy to do so. Yeah, that's duly noted then, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 10 is the Commissioner's performance report. Back to you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose there's a couple of things to say. We've covered quite a lot of it in some of the earlier agenda items, so I don't want to repeat some of the things that we've already said. So I'm going to, at this point, just take it as read and go straight to questions. I'm acutely aware of time, unless you want me to do a bit more of a verbal update on it.
Okay. Panel, are you happy to proceed to questions? In which case, I'm happy to take questions. And we'll start with Councillor Czepiowski.
Very briefly, and I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask this question, rural policing, is that appropriate at this point, the question of rural policing? I'd like to compliment the the Operation Ragwort and others, they were very effective. What is the way that rural policing is currently covered with regard to regular reporting and contact with farms and the like? Not at the high level, because the high level is well covered in the report, like Ragwort, but if you like, the lower level local reassurance, so that local people, including farmers, but not exclusively farmers, know how to, or have confidence that the rural side is being addressed. And it's particularly in regard to the restructuring that the Chief Constable's been undertaking the last couple of years. Thank you.
I suppose in terms of performance, I haven't got rural crime performance in this report, specifically to be helpful to you. But one of the things I will just say is it's still a challenge for when rural communities report to policing that it can often get screened out early doors. There's no CCTV, there was no other witnesses, there was no other, and it can very easily get dropped. And it's thanks to the hard work of our rural officers, of which there's only, on one hand you can count the rural specialist officers that we have, that actually pick up some of those because the farmers communicate with them direct. So there's some very good relationships and contacts that the farming community, our rural communities, have created with the specialist team that's in Devon and Cornwall Police. I work a lot with the National Farmers Union, the Countryside and Landowners Association, and the local rural affairs team, are all in Communicado regularly. So they often attend, they might go to livestock shows and markets. They're out and about at rural events. They were up at the county shows. So there's some huge level of engagement that such a small team managed to do. And I just want to thank them, because they do pick up a lot of those ones that may slip through the net. And I have asked people to come direct to me if their crime has not been investigated, particularly in a rural area, because it is screened out often through this process of no evidence. We're not going to bother investigating it because we're not going to get anywhere. And that is a real issue for us in our rural communities. And it's why the confidence of rural communities has been affected, and why there's been so much effort with Op Ragwort, with trying to encourage communities to report so we get better understanding of what's going on. But let's not also forget that also in our rural communities is domestic abuse, there's violence. It might be on a smaller scale, and it's largely less reported, and there are less services available to a lot of those victims in those rural areas. So I just wanted to make it really clear that rural crime is also all types of crime.
Okay. Councillor Bentley.
Yeah, just a quick one on public confidence, where I note that we are above national averages, but we just gradually, each time we're just smidging down, and that's a bit worrying to me, and I wonder whether that's something that you should be looking at slightly more proactively in your role with the police, to make sure that they are actively seeking to build public confidence, rather than it feels at the moment a little marshmallowy, because we're above national. So it was just a request that you maybe do one of your deep dives or whatever the scrutinies you do with the police, to look at how they can be more proactive in raising public confidence.
You make quite an interesting point, because we're often perform much better than a lot of other police forces, it can be easy to be quite complacent. I think one of the things that I will go away and fully understand is if they understand why it is just doing the changes that it is, because I don't think we often understand why it does that. And obviously, the one thing we do know a lot about public confidence is media reporting. And now we've got social media. There is a lot more influence on people's views on policing that's changed in the last 10 years from when we were looking at this 10 years ago. I am going to go away and have a little think about that, just because complacency is the enemy of the good.
Thanks for that. And I just look at it, it's just little smidges, but it's on all of the indicators other than increasing the percentage of priority victims satisfied, which is stable. So it just felt like not it's a warning sign, but it could be a warning sign if we don't get in there. So I really appreciate your offer there.
Any more questions, members? No, well, I'm not going to push my luck then. We'll note the report then. Okay, happy to note. Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 11 is non-criminal complaints against the Police and Crime Commissioner. So that's over to you, Chief Executive.
really easy today, Chair, and nothing to report to this panel.
You can't note nothing, so we'll move on. Thank you very much. Agenda item 12 is the action log, which you'll find at page 177 if you're using the big packs. So, do you have any questions, please, in relation to the action log? I've got Councillor Penberthy.
Just a quick one on the DCT. Welcome the fact that it's not been totally gone, but obviously there are some reduced numbers, and with some sickness at the moment, we've got a Cornwall sergeant off who's covering Plymouth as well, and Plymouth is 1.5 people, one of whom is now the acting sergeant. That is meaning that the DCT teams are being really spread very, very thin in trying to do their reassurance work, but also feeding stuff in. And I had to have a conversation with Ma'am Doherty the other day about the fact that that meant that at a prevent meeting we had no information at all from the police. Which isn't the DCT responsibility, but they're the ones who often front that. So just can you do some reassurance that because of the restructuring, there's really essential works that they do behind the scenes are able to happen elsewhere in the police, so they're able to still do the work that they do to support neighbourhood policing?
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, mine is obviously on DCT as well. I just wondered when you say that some of the senior roles in the diverse communities teams could be being shifted, what senior roles would be shifted from diverse community teams at a time when we probably need to be thinking about not doing that? And because, and I think we've already had this a bit of this conversation, there were many Pride celebrations through June, and I've been an LGBT campaigner for as long as I care to remember, really. And I don't think I've ever seen the level of hate speech that's emanated from Pride organisers putting up photographs of events that have been taking place, and then underneath that has followed the most abysmal, appalling, disgusting, disgraceful comments. And it feels that things are changing, and to start diluting that diversity team might not be the right time to do that. It's thought.
I'll just make a couple of comments just to assist. So for some factual information for you. So it's an inspector and 2 sergeants that have been put back into frontline policing that were in the diverse communities team. And specialist officers in that team, sort of PCs, have still been retained. But this is the challenge that the chief faces, and I do have sympathy for him. He has vacancies in patrol and neighbourhood. So this is where they're all being pushed to. Everyone's being pushed from other parts of the organisation, this Operation Resolve, into patrol and neighbourhood. Partly because, responding to 999 incidences, the government is putting a lot more pressure on making sure that you respond even quicker than what Devon and Cornwall Police can. And so there's some challenges about in our geography, what does that look like as a patrol function that the chief needs to be thinking about. But there are vacancies on those front lines in both neighbourhood and patrol, and he wanted to make sure that they were filled to the brim before he starts then looking at how we keep that there so that we don't allow those vacancies to happen. This is the issue we've got where we were talking earlier about a PCSO's retired and another one hasn't been replaced. I'm putting pressure on the Chief Constable to keep the 3,610 police officers up to threshold. Sometimes I've found out during a year where they've allowed it to drop quite a bit because they're going to do a big recruitment financially towards the end of the year. And I've said, well, then we haven't got 3,610. So we've rebalanced that. I don't want this big drop, and that because you're never reaching your numbers that you're trying to look for. So there is a challenge about the chief and how he uses his resources. I can tell you he is absolutely committed to tackling hate. We were just in, and I'm sorry, panel, to keep talking about Plymouth, but we were just in Plymouth at the City Leadership Board yesterday discussing how we can support the council's statutory duty on community cohesion and how we as city leaders can support understanding some of the issues in our communities that are causing some of this hate. And we're absolutely dedicated. In fact, he even committed funding to it yesterday. So there's, I just want to give you that commitment from that I know of him and of me. I think it's more about how he uses his police resources in the best way he can. His ambition, which I have heard from him, is he'd like all neighbourhood teams to be able to engage. Why does it take only specialist officers to do it? And that's his thinking at this. He wants all neighbourhood officers to be proactively doing that engagement, not leaving it just to a small centralised team. So that, I know, is where he'd like to take it.
Go on, Councillor Hodgetts.
I know, so in my previous role as independent advisor to Devon and Cornwall Police on all things equality, diversity and inclusion, there was a plan for every single police officer to be a diversity officer. And we're not there yet. And we've probably got rather a long way to go still. So it's keeping those key specialists in the role that is really vital to drive the agenda forward. And that's why I'd quite like, if possible, to keep this action as open and sort of ongoing, and just keep visiting it from time to time just to make sure it's there on the agenda and doesn't disappear.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgetts. I think that request has been noted. Yep. Okay. Councillor Steele.
I'm quite happy for the Commissioner to keep talking about Plymouth. I don't know about other councillors. I want to follow on from what Councillor Hodgetts, how am I pronouncing it? Just said, because whilst I understand the position of the Commissioner in terms of, or the words of the Chief Constable, that actually why should it need to be a specialist team, etc. I can say as a member of the LGBT plus community, it wasn't that long ago that our community would have feared engaging with the police because they were part of the discrimination that we face, and that's something that's a generational trauma perhaps that's still there, and why I personally believe it's so important to have teams like the Diverse Communities team. And so whilst I appreciate what the Chief Constable is saying, I don't know his identity, but it's probably not for his place to tell protected groups how it's best for them to be protected, as it were. So my question is, what assessment have you done with respect to the an equality impact assessment, public sector quality duty around these changes before they were put in place, particularly in terms of engaging with the LGBT plus community and any other communities that are impacted by these changes that you've made?
First thing I'm going to say is we are getting into operational territory, and I get into trouble every time we talk about this in particular. There are a few issues around the chief is allowed to use his resources as he sees fit to keep our communities safe. That's the first thing. There is a level of scrutiny and checking and balancing that I can do. I don't believe the way that he moves his resources around needs an equality impact assessment in the same way that a local authority or someone else would require. And if you look in the action log from before, we've received the assurances from the Deputy Chief Constable that an equality impact assessment has been done for Op Resolve. So they don't have to do it for everything, but they have done one for Op Resolve, which is moving all of these officers into all these different new positions on the front line. I understand your concerns. It's raised nearly at every community, every scrutiny panel that we have, and I just want to be really clear that you're not criticising the diverse communities team's performance. You're not criticising the individuals that are in those roles, and you are huge supporters of that team. So I just want to be clear when we say that out loud, because it feels like a lot of criticism of the police when I know that they do a really good job. I want to reassure you that they are not removing diverse specialist officers. The reality is that we have to have specialist officers to deal with our community who are just people. Seems a bit strange. That does seem a bit strange because we are in 2026. We should be a lot more educated as a police force to be able to deal with people from all different types of backgrounds. But I am aware the relationships and the trust that is required from communities is built through stabilisation of individual officers. So I do understand that. I just want to reassure you, Councillor Steele, that the Chief Constable's committed. I'm happy at some future meeting to check whether or not this is working still, but I'm sure operationally you'll be able to tell in your communities whether or not your communities are accessing it appropriately and getting the right support and the confidence to report.
Coming back to you, Councillor Pemberley.
Thank you. And maybe as this is being a discussion now, I would like to say thank you to you and to the Chief Constable for bringing some of your data online up to date, because I know that was something that we raised over a number of meetings. So I think that's a positive move forward. And I would also like to thank you for the fact that last night you did agree with other members of the city leadership team to join in the MHCLG LGA Belong approach here in Plymouth, which is probably, this is the first time we've ever said anything publicly about that. So as you've said it, I will follow on. But I really appreciate that in terms of my role within Cabinet. But I think this is something that is not ever going to go away, because we know that hate crime is underreported, and we know that people with protected characteristics have often had bad experience of policing, and that can mean it is very difficult for them to trust to make reporting, and that is as much for people with a learning disability as it is for someone with a gender identity or someone of a different faith. And as the host of the oldest Ashkenazi synagogue in the English-speaking world that's been in continuous use here, just a matter of meters away from here, we know that those sorts of issues are ongoing, and there can be issues that need to be overcome, and that team is going to be important even if everyone becomes really diverse aware, because it's the fact they've been there a long time, and those relationships don't always happen in neighbourhoods where people move. I think there is a need to watch it, but I would like to say thank you for the fact we have seen some major moves forward on things that we've been pushing on over recent meetings.
Thank you. Any more questions on the scorecard? No? Okay. In which case, we are asked to note the report and progress therein. Happy to note. Okay, last agenda item today, you'll be pleased to know, is the work programme. I'm going to turn to you, Jake, to start with, because you'll have some additions picked up from this morning's meeting. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Additions from this meeting, I've got the strategic plan for safeguarding men's violence against women and girls to be amended for the, I think the title is in for the 20th of November. I've had a request from Councillor Hackett to put Operation Forward on there, just on the work programme, but I wonder if is that more relevant to a briefing for councillors, or would they like it to be a specific item?
We've all had Operation Forward briefings. I think it would be useful to have a strategic discussion and to have that in public when people are considering whether to stand for public office.
I think that's what Councillor Hackett was looking for, certainly, Councillor Pemberley. Yeah.
Thank you. And then the final one, as a result of the public question that was asked, to put public confidence in policing on the agenda with a specific thread for hate crime reporting.
Okay. So, go on, Councillor Pemberley.
Yeah, I was just looking, our next agenda's already got 3 focuses on it. I just wonder if the panel was happy for us to move the Councillor Advocate best practice to a future meeting to put safeguarding in next time.
You took the words out of my mouth. I mean, looking at Forward Planet's already got 3 really meaty agenda items. It's got to be a 1 in, 1 out, hasn't it, really? I think you're absolutely right. Otherwise, we'll be through to 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So the proposal is from Councillor Pemberley that we move the Councillor Advocate best practice to November, which frees up a slot.
I was going to suggest for safeguarding, because I think safeguarding is a really important issue that we share as councils, other statutory partners and police.
Members, are you broadly happy? Yeah. And then the Operation Forward, I think it's probably important as well in the current climate, isn't it? Commissioner, do you think perhaps we might put Vision Zero back? I know I'm a Vision Zero member, and you'll probably shout at me later for even suggesting it. But with what's going on, nationally at the moment, Operation Forward would probably be quite an important topic to be discussing.
I think bringing up Forward would be really helpful because we are reviewing it at the moment, and I think the more in the public domain that either shows that it works, doesn't work, or needs changing, I think the better, because I think there is more that we could do to support people in public office than is actually allowed or enabled at the moment.
So we're happy if we take Vision Zero in November and we take Councillor Advocate in November alongside VORG. So we'll have 3 substantive items there and then have the Operation Forward come in as well. All right, everyone happy with that? Sorry, Councillor Hodges?
I was just, so with your letter to leaders and councillors, it sounds like it's a very operational approach and not necessarily a strategic approach, and perhaps could we have some data as a result of that review? How frequently it's been used, how successful is it been, male, female, because it's serious, I think, and it does need to be in the public domain.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, members, for your time today. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, officers, for your time. We'll close it now. Thanks very much. Lunches will be in Warspite, guys.